We understand there's some questions that you've posed to us, but Kirsty will take us through those in due course. So housekeeping first, there are no planned fire alarms. If something does occur and you hear that alarm, we're exiting through that door and convening in the car park. For those that do need to use the facilities, they are just to reception and through the doors. Please do use that as you need to, and tea, coffee facilities there in the corner. Apologies.
We have apologies from Jane Sivakumar, Councillor Sir Steve Houghton and Sarah Norman.
Thank you, Kate. Morrissey?
We are just pending Julia Burrows coming.
Any declarations of interest on item 4 on the agenda? Any declaration of interest relevant to the agenda, Madhway?
Yeah, so PDA element, obviously, as a general practitioner myself, I will have an interest in it.
Thank you. Any other declarations?
I just update my given ones. My interim joint chief executive has been substantive since 1st September with the Rotherham FFT, and I'm also a member of the Labour Party.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, item 5, Kirsty.
Yeah, just before we start, can I just ask if we can all speak up a little bit, because the acoustics in this room aren't always great, are they? So if I'm shouting, let me know. Chris can't hear me. So yeah, patient story today. So this is I think we've done them different, haven't we, every time we've done a meeting, but I'm hoping that the technology is going to be on our side today, because we've got another video that we wanted to show you. So I'm sure you will all be aware, and we've got on the agenda later, that we've had the launch of the Integrated Care Partnership Strategy across South Yorkshire. And to go with the launch of that strategy, we've got a campaign called Our Future South Yorkshire. So some of you in the room will have already done a short video that we've put out on social media, shared with staff, that talks about basically our aspirations. What do we want for our future generations living in South Yorkshire? So we took the opportunity to link in with that, and Jane, who's joined us on Teams today, hosted a fantastic event last week. I think it was last week. It feels like it's gone so quickly, with as Barnsley CVS for colleagues working in the voluntary and community sector in Barnsley. So there was about 90 odd people, I think, there, which was fantastic. Really vibrant event. And as usual with comms people normally get the sort of a bit of a look of fear when they see us approaching, and I'm hoping it's because we're normally trying to ask them to do something and appear on camera. Well, we've got a few people who were more than happy to do that. So we've got a short video, and this is focusing on people working and probably living in Barnsley, working in voluntary and community organisations, and just a few of them to talk about what their hopes and aspirations were for Our Future South Yorkshire and for people in Barnsley. So we thought we'd take that opportunity to use that and bring that back to you here as a bit of a focus on colleagues in the voluntary and community sector, but perhaps a bit of prompt for you to think about how you might want to talk about it within your own organisations and teams. I'll hand over to you, Paige.
My name's Kieran Campbell. I'm Head of Foundation at Resident Community at Barnsley Football Club. My hope for South Yorkshire is that everyone has the opportunity to lead a healthier, happier, more physically active life.
Hello, I'm Anthony from Cloverleaf. My Barnsley 2 and Barnsley Safe Places. My hope for future generations of Barnsley is to grow up and thrive in a welcoming place that's safe for everybody.
Hi, I'm Faye. And I'm Rachel. And we're youth workers from the Youth Association. We work across South and West Yorkshire with young people at street level. And what we hope for the future generations of South Yorkshire, for young people, that there's safe spaces provided, equal opportunities and access to support services, as well as young people's voices be heard and valued.
Well, my name's Adrian, and my ambition for Barnsley and its people is that everyone has the best start in life, the opportunity to live long and healthy lives, and they are happy and healthy in their later life.
I'm Andrea Batty and I'm the Youth Work Manager for YMCA Barnsley. And our vision for the next generation of young people really is that they continue to have safe places to go, so they have access to a wide range of youth provision, access to youth services, activity clubs, but more than that, access to youth workers, trusted adults with whom they can build relationships, seek support and access the services they need.
Thank you, Paige. So just a few there, and I forgot we've got to start from Adrian as well, haven't we? We'd nobbled you into doing that, Adrian. So thank you very much. But I think that one of the reflections.
I'm a volunteer, you know.
You are a volunteer, yes. I think one of the reflections for me was that I mean, we randomly picked people and talked to a whole group of people. None of them talked about health services. None of them talked about anything that we might probably traditionally think of. They talked about safe spaces. They talked about access for young people to have opportunities to be physically active. They talked about trusted relationships. And I just thought that might bring in a slightly different dimension than perhaps we're always used to talking about at these meetings. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jane, did you want to say anything very briefly about the event? Because you had a great attendance, didn't you? About 90 people that joined that event.
Yeah, it was really good. We had Joe presenting along with Karen Smith and talking about, amongst other things, the ICP strategy. We had a bit about safeguarding, so Kath Erin came along and did that. And we were able to share what we've been doing at Barnsley CVS. Now we're trying to bring the sector together. It was really, really good.
Excellent. Thank you for convening that conversation. It's just so important. And thank you, Kirsty and colleagues, for capturing those narratives from individuals. Really, there are some common themes and there's some words there, weren't there, about safe, welcoming, healthy, happy, best start. All those words that we know that people just continue to say to us about the things that matter for them in their everyday lives. So, any particular reflections from that video at all? Anybody wants to share? Okay, thank you, Kirsty. So we've got the place involvement report at item 6.
Yeah. So report this time we've covered a topic that we've talked about previously, and it links into the video that we've just shown. So this is talking really about the next step. So we went out to talk to Barnsley people and across South Yorkshire about what matters to you for your health and well-being. And you'll know that we received a really, really good response for Barnsley. And that helped influence the Integrated Care Partnership strategy. It will also help influence the Barnsley plan, and it will also help influence a fair few of the projects and programmes that sit underneath that. So I think that's a really rich insight report. But one of the things that we recognised was actually there are some groups and some communities that we wanted to hear more from. So there's a next phase of work on that. So this is, the conversation doesn't stop, it carries on. But this is some specific work that we've commissioned Health Watch colleagues to do across South Yorkshire and specifically in Barnsley, to go out and have some more detailed conversations. So I've highlighted some of the groups in there. So people who are experiencing homelessness, what does it feel like for them? What are their, what are their experiences, and how can that influence some of the work that we're doing in Barnsley to be able to support them? We've got groups like people like sex workers. We've got young people with experience of either currently or leaving care. So some really, really key groups that we might not have captured some views on before, but actually we want to go out and have some really focused conversations with those. So this report is basically just highlighting that so you're aware of it. And also, it might pick up some things in your organisations where you might think you can make some connections and help us have those conversations. And what we'll do is we'll bring back the summary of those. We do now have the Barnsley cut of the data from the first phase. So we've got that information that we'll be sharing background with partners. Like I say, to continue that conversation to help influence the work that we do and bring the voice of Barnsley people through there. So summary, next phase, that'll happen over the next few weeks, and we'll be able to receive that information back here, and we'll sort of cascade it through the different programme boards, so we can carry on using that. So It was for noting the report, so I'll leave the report there. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a note in action there, you're going to share the Barnsley slice of the report with everybody so we can all see that, and clearly that will inform our thinking in terms of the Barnsley plan as it should. Thanks, Kirsty. So as I said, welcome to members of the public for joining us today. We have some questions that you've kindly shared with us. Kirsty, taking us through the questions.
Yeah, and then you can please tell me it'll be I'll keep quiet next part of the agenda. So yeah, thank you very much to I'm calling you members of the public. It feels very formal, doesn't it? But thank you to colleagues for coming along and for submitting the questions. I think this is the first time that we've had questions from the public. You know, we're a new partnership, we're a new meeting, but I know Pete and Peter and Nora have been to previous CCG governing body meetings before and submitted questions. So some of these will reflect some of the work we've done previously, but I just want to say thank you very much, and please send in more questions. They're always welcome. So this particular item is us reading out the questions and we will provide the answers. What we also do with these is we will provide the full written responses that will be attached to the minutes, just so everybody's aware that that's how it works. So anybody can go on and read the questions and answers afterwards. And obviously we'll be sending the responses back to the individuals that submitted them. So I'm going to take these in order. So I'll read out the questions and the responses, and we'll do it in that order. So these questions are, there's 5 questions here, and I'm going to take a few of them together because they're all along the same theme. So question, why does the South Yorkshire Integrated Care Board Barnsley Place-based partnership have no representation from local people and communities in priority setting and decision-making forums, as the statutory guidance working in partnership with people and communities states that it should? Do the board recognise the guidance does not say to have someone representing the public interest, but that it actually says representation from local people and communities? And what does the board think has changed since Kirsty, so that's referring to me, I'm assuming, quoted from the earlier September 2021 mandatory guidance for ICSs on working with people and communities that listed the required place partnership board membership should have representation from people and communities? And then finally, do the board recognise that by ignoring this mandatory requirement, they make it very difficult for Barnsley people to find out how decisions about health and care services in Barnsley are being made, by whom and where and when? So 4 questions there around a theme. So again, just wanted to say thank you very much for the question. I think it's really helpful to raise that, and it's something that at previous meetings we have discussed. So really welcome the question. I think what our responses would be is that I think we recognise that this is one way of interpreting the guidance. It's not the way we have interpreted the guidance. Our understanding is that that's not how it was intended, but I think it's really helpful to have that conversation. So what we are doing with our colleagues, because this is a place committee and we link in with the other place committees across South Yorkshire, we're taking that back, we're seeking clarification, we'll have conversations with NHS England. I think that's right to do so. And another part of what we're doing, which is an ongoing piece of work, is looking at best practice. You know, this is not set in stone. Clearly, this is guidance. It's around there for interpretation, but we really welcome the question, and we will take that back. The next question then talks about, why does the South Yorkshire and Integrated Care Board at Barnsley not have clear and transparent mechanisms for ensuring strategies and changes are developed with people with lived experience of health and care services and wider communities, which the statutory guidance states they should? So the answer to this is, you know, we continue to work with all our partners, all colleagues around the table representing those partner organisations, to establish the right involvement systems for the new structure. So using some of what we class as the old systems where they're appropriate. You know, we're not chucking the baby out with the bathwater. This is making the use of the good foundations that we've got, but recognising that we are in a different place now. The views of our citizens are always welcome on this, and we've provided actually quite an extensive opportunity for people to engage with us on how we might want to do that and what that might look like. And that was as part of the Start With People strategy last year. So our strategy for people and communities and how we do that. And we're now encouraging people to do that again. So, you know, whilst we're refreshing that particular strategy, we'll be really keen to hear from people of how they think we ought to do that and the suggestions for those. And then secondly, set of questions noting here. So as a long-time user of the internet, including the ICS, ICP and ICB information and web pages, I found it very difficult to locate information about this meeting, so this particular meeting. The South Yorkshire web pages are a mishmash of old and new information. So again, you know, really welcome of the feedback. It's always helpful. It is a new website, and I think the more we can get people that we're encouraging to use that website to feedback, the better, because that's where we'll make improvements. In terms of the specifics of this meeting, so in line with all the other South Yorkshire board meetings, this particular meeting is promoted and advertised on the website, and we will over the course of the next few months look at how we can do that a bit differently. You know, there's lots of opportunities there to how we promote it. You know, social media sites, through, you know, groups that we're linked in with, but again, you know, there's no right or wrong way of doing this, and any suggestions are more than welcome. Similar question, is this meeting posted out to health related public organisations or members of the public who are interested? Very short answer is yes, it goes out to colleagues across this meeting, but again, always welcome our suggestions for ways that we can increase and promote that. Next question is around the South Yorkshire Citizens Panel. Is that still active? And if so, does the Barnsley Place Board have any contact? So the Citizens Panel is part of the what we call the old governance system, as part of the South Yorkshire and Bassett Law integrated care system. It is no longer in place. It is no longer part of the governance. There is still a much a comprehensive mailing list, but as a Citizens Panel, it does not exist. And again, linking back to what I said earlier, you know, we're always looking for ways of best practice on this. And actually what we're really interested in is not having something that's prescriptive and, you know, set out necessarily that says you should do it. What we're looking to do is get the best for local people and local voices and local communities. And we think there's some really rich ways in Barnsley in which we do that already. So, so that's the Citizens Panel. And then finally, we've got a question around the strategy that I referred to earlier. So Start With People, our people and community strategy. So how will Barnsley Place Committee and the Barnsley Place Partnership involve public and patients? So again, picking up on the answer I mentioned earlier, you know, this is an ongoing conversation. We are looking at ways that we can do this, making the most of what we've already done, building on that, but looking at new ways. And absolutely, there is an opportunity to shape some of that as we review the South Yorkshire People and Communities Strategy. And we've got some specific contact details there that we'll be able to provide. And then some examples of other areas, so Nottingham and Nottinghamshire ICS, which are given as areas of good practice. And noting that, you know, we might want to look to that. So, you know, thank you very much for that, and we will do that.
Thank you, Kirsty. Thank you for sending in the questions, which are really valuable. I mean, the ICS is still relatively new organisations, and certainly our partnership is still relatively new. So we are growing into these new arrangements, but ensuring that the model of engagement, participation, co-production works really well for us in place is really, really important to us. And I know it matters a lot to the people around this table that we get this right. So we need to work on the basis of what works. And I do believe we've got some strong forums and some strong engagement. You know, we've got the mental health forum, and we've got other protected characteristics groups as well that are convening. We're doing some work with Think Local Act Personal, who are doing some really great work in terms of adult social care. But we need to make sure that we have a collective view about how to make that work really well for us, and people really feel included and are participating in our future, because it's about co-designing that future, isn't it, together? So we do need to do some further work on that. And I think you've heard from Kirsty in terms of the feedback, our commitment to think carefully and sensitively about how best to do that over the next period. Yeah. Okay.
Just start as a member of public. not asking questions.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's really helpful. Yeah, okay.
And as the questions that we've just asked, my question, I asked first 4 years ago, right? And there's not been very much change. We immerse ourselves in public and patient participation from a national level, and we are aware what should be done. The other thing is I've talked to people, right, who work in health service in hospital and other places. Them knowing that, for instance, I'll come to this meeting and also knowing what we do otherwise with the mental health forum and the other meetings, mental health strategy we're working on. And they are incredibly confused about what the ICB is. They have not got a first clue. They knew what the CCG were, and that's the only thing I could say to them. Think about that. But they're up. I mean, these are people on managers to some degree to talk to, and they go, I have no idea what it's all about. And this is the, if we can't get the people who work in the system to know what it's all about, how are we going to get the people who are just like, you know, service users to know what it's all about? And I think that that's what we're talking about, really.
Well, I'm really pleased you're championing that, because I think it's really important that we get this right. It is complex. It is, us working in it find it sometimes a little bit complicated to navigate. So I think it's beholden upon us to a craft, I think a proposition, a sort of a schematic, call it what you like, something that connects with people, that people can resonate with. And I think there's an opportunity, particularly as we shape in the Barnsley plan, I say shape in the Barnsley plan, that probably gives us an opportunity as well, equally, to think about how we go about the sharing of that and the communication around all of that. And clearly, in terms of some of those priorities, therein lies the opportunity, doesn't it, to make sure that we are co-creating some of those future estates. Very quickly, Nora, go on. I know you've submitted another question, Nora, as well, which we'll carry forward to the next.
With respect to everybody, I understand you will want to make it happen and that you will believe in what we're trying to promote. But nothing Kirsty said about involving people apart from the face-to-face at that meeting is offline. The 20% of people, according to the Mental Health Commissioner in Barnsley, are not online, don't use it. So that's one point. And the other point is, it's not about engaging with people when you've got something to say. It's about a continual dialogue and people out there knowing if something's going on and they think it might be worked better and they've got a good idea how that could happen, where they go with that information and how that can be fed into the decision-making processes, which is what the guidance that I mentioned in my questions, which is mandatory, and that comes from on high. I'm not making it up. And one is statutory, which is also mandatory. That's what it says. It should be ongoing dialogue with the people that you serve.
Thank you, Nora, and thank you for bringing that challenge in for us. It's quite right, really. So I think we've given a commitment to consider that, to think through creatively about how we might do that and be the best version of ourselves in that space. So I think that's what we want to try and do. So thank you very much again. Okay, so let's go back to continue rather on with the agenda, and we've got item 8, the minutes from the Barnsley partnership meeting on the 26th of January. Going through those, I'm not going to go through them page by page, but are there any matters of accuracy at all in those minutes that anybody wishes to raise? Give you some time to have a look through. No, okay. If not, we just record those as meeting, and let's go straight onto the action log. And let's have a look. We've got an action there in terms of mental health, learning disability and autism assurance report. An action for Jane. Give apologies actually from Jane Seaver-Coomer, haven't we, today?
I think that action is complete, Wendy.
We've got action there in terms of BPC 10 around approach to population health and inequalities. There were some actions, I think, for Andy Snell, and I believe I've got an update on those. So the BPC 10, the draft plan was shared with the place committee for the development session in February, if you remember, and work has been undertaken to further align 2 documents, and we aim to submit the final versions to the Place Committee in April. Equally, the Health Equity Group are working to standardise the measurement and reporting of inequalities that will enable us to demonstrate progress and impact. And Joe Minton is going to be liaising with Andy Snell to that effect. Okay, which will take us then to our BPC now is complete. I believe that's all from the action. Richard.
Under the mental health action against Jane's name, it would be useful to hear that there's been a conversation is great, but and closing it down, but without knowing the outcome of that conversation, and then none the wiser as to whether we're making any progress in that area of placements, which I think are quite an important quality issue for us. It'd just be useful if we could. Yeah, I'm happy the action can be closed in the sense of Jane's done it, but I think we probably want to know what the conclusions that will.
Okay, so if you want to just put that on to Jane to give us a bit of an update in terms of the outcome from the conversation. And there is continuing conversations, I think, with regards to out of area placements in terms of mental health, learning disability and autism. I think overall as a system, the trend is in the wrong direction. And there is most definitely some work that we need to do across all of the 4 places and across all of the NHLDA providers to better understand that position, understand I guess some of the causes and effect, the efficacy of early help services, step-up services for people with mental health, learning disability and autism, wait lists for diagnosis, for example, for autism are far too long. So probably a helpful thing for us to keep regularly actually on our assurance update, and it may well be when we get to the quality report and maybe further updates on there. So we'll keep it open and ask for an update, Richard. Thank you. Okay. We get back to the agenda. So Place Director update, and probably actually apologies because I should have said at the start of the meeting there is an extraordinary ICB board meeting today to deal with the transition of pharmacy, ophthalmology and dentistry, and for that meeting to be quorate, I have to leave this meeting to go and join that meeting at 2:30 for half an hour. We've also had to, and I'm passing over the chair on to Jamie. We've also had to make some changes to the agenda. So we are making a bit of a movement from item 18 and 19 on the agenda, which is the finance updates Roxana was covering. We're going to pick them up after item 11, as Roxana equally has to go and join a meeting with chief finance officers too. So apologies for that. I should have mentioned that earlier on. So bear with us. It could be a little bit of a dance today, sadly, but it's by necessity. Okay, so Place Director update. So I'm always a big believer in focusing on what's strong as well as what's wrong. So it's really important that we do that. So a few things to highlight for us in Barnsley is that it was great to join the opening of Barnsley Hospital's new intensive care unit. We had a great exclusive look at that, and I have to say I had a lump in my throat when Tim was cutting the ribbon, as he was reflecting upon the journey to delivering that 7.3 million, was it something like 7.3 million, and that delivers a drastically increased capacity on that. So that was just so great to see. And wow, what an attendance as well. There was loads of people that joined the opening of that. Some great media coverage. NHS free targeted lung health checks programs kicked off, so that's great to see that. That started I think it kicked off in Wath, didn't it? I think Tesco. Wath and Tesco, yeah, for the Durn people, offering health checks for people aged between 55 and 74. So that was really well received. So lots of great coverage on that, and lots of people actually accessing that service. I think the next plan is to move over to Central and the North East, with all areas having been covered by March 2024. Jane's helpfully shared with us already that we had 90 people representing the CVS sector, and a really rich conversation that happened last week. Lots of presentations. That was great. Thanks to Bob and to Dave that have joined us on the call, Dave Ramsey. We were all asked to join a visit around discharge. We were convened by Leslie Watts, who is both the CEO of Chelsea and Westminster Hospital Trust, but also the National League for Discharge. So there was a conversation that was convened, and I think Barnsley showed its best foot forward, the best foot forward on that. And I think we most clearly are one of the strongest systems in terms of supporting people to be discharged from hospital, but we're not resting on our laurels. So Dave, Bob and I reflected on the findings from that, and we'll be taking those reflections into our next Place Partnership Delivery Group to talk about the even better if there. So that's great. So we're on with that. Launch of the ICP. Sheena, you're going to talk a bit more about the ICP later on the agenda. A bit of a date for diaries as well, heads up. Really looking forward to welcoming on the 9th of June as part of Carers Week, Trevor Clower, who was the founder of the Carers Roadshow, Hilary Garrett, who is the Deputy Chief Nursing Officer for NHS England and NHS Improvement, and Paul Vaughan, who works with NHS England as the Director of Nursing and Transformation, and Louise Brady, who's the Head of Primary Care. They're all coming as part of a Carers Roadshow. It's going to take place in the Glassworks. So we need to make sure we get that information out. I know many people in this room, Jill, colleagues, Deb Anglesey from the Council, Andrea Parkin from the Federation, has been really key in convening conversations. And we'll be the first place, I think, James, outside of Nottinghamshire, I think they've done this.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so we want to record that. And it's going to be, I think, a feature of the National Deputy Chief Nursing Officers bulletin. So yeah, looking forward to that. Some practical things to share. Yesterday we convened our extended health and care leadership team for an organisational development session. That was great. It was just great to be face to face together again, and really reflecting upon our collective leadership and what does good look like in that space if we were leading well together. And leadership, community leadership, of course, is a facet of that, because that's clearly a facet of that. So what does that look like? And Jane and Adrian clearly were challenging us on that. And we also focused on bold ambitions, what are the things that we could do differently? And those things will be feeding into our Barnsley's Place plan. We continue to navigate the complexity of money. It's not getting easy, it never is. The complexity of the finances, and as I said earlier on, those conversations are continue to be explored both with providers, with the ICB, with councils and our partners to see how we can tackle those financial challenges together. The Place Partnership governance arrangements, if you remember, we had a whole suite of governance papers to travel through all of our boards and cabinet. That's now been concluded, so they've all been to every board and done the rounds. We've had some helpful feedback and support from boards and indeed NEDs alike. I also wanted to say that as we head out of winter, I do think it's important to pause and to reflect across healthcare and community, because if you just think about what we've navigated together, we've navigated Strep A, we've navigated the flu season, we've navigated COVID, and that's not business as usual, is it by any means, but we've navigated COVID. We've had other winter viruses to tackle. We've had various days of strike action. We've had some consecutive 4-day, we will have bank holidays to figure out. And we've sort of like managed through this the best that we can. And we've done that because we're a strong partnership, and we've had teams working 24/7 throughout that. It really pressured days for everybody around this room and their teams. And we try to maintain services to the best quality that we can between us all. So I think I just wanted to note that, to extend our collective thanks to all of our health and care staff and our community and volunteers for all of their support and their ongoing resilience. Finally, a couple of things really. Planning underway ahead of the further doctors strike. So I don't know whether you wanted to pick that up right now. We might want to do that in a moment, but I've just got one final thing to say. I really use this as a final thing, is to Barnsley Council has been shortlisted as Council of the Year in the Local Government Awards and also in the MJ Awards. So they're today. That's why Sarah and the leader aren't here. Sarah Norman and the leader aren't here today, but they are doing their pitch down in London for the MJ Awards. And we also wish them the best of luck, but we also wish the best of luck to our Barnsley Old People Physical Activity Alliance, Jane, as well. They are you going down, Jane, as well as part of that? No.
No, I'm not. Debbie, the current CEO, will be involved in it.
Oh, I keep forgetting. Yes, so they've also been shortlisted in the health and wellbeing category for the awards, and we'll find out about that some point during June. So I'm going to pass over to Richard or Bob around the strike.
Yeah, well, I'll kick off and then I'll pass off to Bob. We've had a reasonably well managed 4-day strike by junior doctors already, and we had quite a lot of support from our senior medical staff in the hospital to get that right. It unfortunately led to a lot of cancellations of people with outpatients and non-urgent surgery, which obviously we don't need because we're trying to catch up on those things. But it was necessary to do that in order to keep the hospital safe to deal with emergencies. We learned some lessons from that, which will be helpful in any future strikes. But I think we all need to be very conscious that this next set of strikes is an order of magnitude more challenging. So for a 4-day strike, which actually affects 5 days because it goes from 7 in the morning on the Tuesday to 7 in the morning on the Saturday. It follows on from a 4-day bank holiday, followed by a 2-day weekend. So we've got a 10-day stretch where we don't have normal services. Never had to deal with anything like that before, and I am very worried about that. We're making all the usual contingency plans, but there will be a very significant impact on activity. Patients will have their appointments cancelled and need rearranging. It is also a time where staff take annual leave, and so there'll be leave booked, holidays paid for, those sort of things that we can't undo. So the impact will be greater. I think it's also true to say and staff are highly committed, but actually asking them to do this again and again starts to wear people's resolve down. So it won't just be affecting the hospital. Our hospital will be affecting Swift. It'll be affecting primary care. Key points there for me are that there's a risk of the sort of slowdown in patient care, meaning the hospital gets full and we then struggle to deal with new patients. So again, reason I wanted just have a few minutes just to mention it here is just to encourage all of our partners across the system to help us with that by avoiding the avoidable use of the hospital in that period. As Wendy said, we've got very good discharge arrangements, but if there's anything extra we could do in the period before, during, and after that, would be very, very much appreciated. Bob, do you want to add anything to that?
That's a key point. I mean, it does affect everyone else. I think public struggle. I think very sympathetic to any of the issues that staff are trying to raise. I think it's harder to understand the impacts of the junior doctor strike. It represents about 40% of the medical workforce. So typically we have 15 doctors on overnight. They're all junior doctors of varying ages. They're not junior at all in age and experience. It's just a term that's used for that. We've already agreed to maintain escalated areas through this month because of this and the existing pressure. We were up at 4 till yesterday anyway, so we're at heightened state anyway. And I guess we'll maintain the specialties that we can, but we're really trying to sort of centralise the workforce over these days. So understanding that, and I think we still saw a lot of GP referrals that day. I'm not clear because I can't assess whether it was right or not, and we do need to trust the clinician that has the patient in front of them. What we really need to try and do everything we can for those days. We had some really busy days actually in ED.
Yeah, surprisingly so. In the ambulance strikes, activity fell, but it didn't fall during the strikes.
Just didn't resonate with the public. So I guess these issues manifest in different ways across the patch. So I'm not, we do understand that, but I think it's really just a plea for people. We are really worried.
Collectively worried, I think. We're all worried about the impact of this one. And, we were told just Jamie to convene an urgent gold next week so we can really, really challenge ourselves, I think, collectively about the art of the possible. Jill, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I suppose for us, Richard, obviously I'd let Dave come in around, mental health and inpatients, because obviously it's got a massive impact in terms of inpatient units in particular. Obviously, fortunately for us in community, in terms of physical health services, obviously we're largely nurse and therapy led. But I suppose just in terms of trying to reassure, obviously part of our planning, which was part of the planning last time ahead of the game, is to actually almost treat it as though we're going to have a long bank holiday and actually try and
promote and uplift staff in terms of pre-strike. So obviously get ready for more discharges because you're going to try and get as many people out as possible. I think that's becoming increasingly difficult, particularly with the intermediate care pathway and neighbourhood rehab services. And we'll just do as best, Richard, in terms of making sure that we can take discharges as swiftly as we can, but also on the proactive care element. Although it is a bit slower streamed than we would like, actually the level 3 and 4 calls from Yas and the push from Yas through right care out into communities working really well. And it's progressing, and it's actually increasing that on a daily basis from a proactive care perspective. And I know people are sceptical about virtual ward releasing hospital bed capacity, but actually we're doing really well in Barnsley, and 50% of those virtual ward patients are step ups, not step down. So from a proactive care perspective, I think we're doing as much as we possibly can at the minute, but we have got some hotspots, which I know people are aware of, in district nursing as an example. But I suppose, you know, just to reassure you that we'll make sure that we can take whatever is required really into community services. And the staff are up for that, you know, we're trying to support each other.
Thank you. We all appreciate that, Jill. James, did you want to come in too?
No. Again, on sort of behalf of primary care, you know, we acknowledge the issues that are there, and we're doing our best to support that, and only send the people across that that need to go there. Last time around, we made sure that we were fully staffed with the extended hours services and out of hours services that we do. We'll do the same again for next week, allowing that it's a much longer period of time. But we always tend to increase staff over the Easter bank holiday and things as well. So hopefully we will play our part to ease the pressure as much as we can.
Okay, so we'll explore it up together as ever. Dave, did you want to come in?
It was, yeah, we're just on the mental health bit. I know Jill mentioned, so it was just to, I guess, just offer a bit of assurance that although things are pressured, we have been able, and we're confident we will be able to continue to cover all, well, inpatient services, but also all kind of key community health, mental health pathways, particularly anything around urgent care and 24/7 sort of response. So yeah, so those will be covered. I mean, clearly there's going to be an impact on more core responsibilities. There will be some cancellation of appointments in the community, like some rescheduling of those appointments. But we have been able to cover all the key pathways.
Thanks. Thank you, Dave, for that update. Okay, so we'll pick it up early next week. Jamie, you're going to convene, aren't you, a conversation next week? Okay. Thank you. So we have at item 11 the Barnsley Place achievement. So this is the summary that we send into the ICB, and we thought we just needed to regularly schedule that into here as well, so you can all see what it is we're saying about Barnsley when we are at the board. And again, this is just about, you know, focusing on the positive areas. There is an ask for us for the next ICB place updates to have a focus on health inequalities. Quite rightly so. We've done some initial mapping, haven't we, about the investments in health inequalities at Barnsley, and we'll be building our narrative around all of that. So definitely we'll be asking people in this room to support us in building that summary in due course. And now I'm passing on to Sheena.
Thought you were bringing things forward.
Oh no, sorry, I am bringing things forward. Sorry. Oh, just chairing. It's a good job you're looking after me, Sheena. It's a good job you're looking after me. I'm handing over to Roxanna.
This agenda item at 18 and 19. So I'll present the ICB. So this is the Barnsley Place part of and finance update, and then our finance lead from across Barnsley will be joining us on Teams, I believe. So I've just requested that they join. So Robert's here now. So I'll quickly take us through the actual Barnsley Place update position. So this is for this financial year for 22-23. So it just sets out, and I'll go into a little bit more detail just for people who didn't see the report previously, but essentially because of the close down of CCGs, this financial year is broken into two parts. So we've got Q1, which was when the CCG still existed, and we've got Q2 to 4, which represents the ICB expenditure within Barnsley Place. The content of this report, however, does cover the full year, just for ease, and so that we are presenting the full position. And that's largely because the ICB and ICS are being managed nationally for the full financial year, despite the fact that the CCGs were in the first quarter. So headline position then. So I've just set out for the Place Committee the budget for Barnsley Place. So we have a budget of 550 million. So in November, month 8 reporting, which was the last time I brought a report to this committee, we had a budget of 545 million. So that's moved by £5 million. And I've just provided a breakdown there of kind of the additional funding that we've received as a place. All of that has been committed and been discharged in terms of going out to our providers to deliver care. So you'll see in there, there's the Community Diagnostic Hub, which is down at the Glassworks. Additional roles reimbursement, which are the roles out in primary care, hospital discharge funding, which was supporting the discharge, which was the additional announcement from government that we received, and that was committed to support through winter. And then there was some surge and capacity funding that was released, and again, that's been passed out to Barnsley Hospital. So forecast position then against that £550 million budget is that we have been asked to improve our financial position. Normally we would deliver a break even, so our expenditure would match our allocation, but we have been asked to stretch ourselves and deliver a £1 million surplus. And that's largely to support the wider system. So this is NHS providers within South Yorkshire plus the ICB. Due to the fact that when we were planning, we had a £25.5 million deficit that we needed to get to identify in order that we break even. So that's the reason why we've all been asked to improve our financial positions. We have done that in Barnsley, so we have managed to identify that largely through slippage in investments where we've not been able to appoint staff, through other non-recurrent measures in terms of things that we've reviewed in our spending plans and our balance sheet, essentially, in terms of clearing out anything in there that is actually not going to come through in terms of expenditure. We do continue to have some fairly significant pressures around continuing healthcare and complex cases and prescribing. So prescribing, we are not seeing any slowdown in terms of no cheaper stock. And we are seeing that each month the forecast actually is probably slightly understated in the region of about £200,000 to £300,000 each month. So that just kind of sets out the level of risk and pressure that we've got coming through into the system. And as we move into next year, that becomes even more challenging, given that we're moving into a kind of first year of being in potentially financial deficit when we finish planning. And how are we going to manage that, and how do we have any kind of sort of degree of control over that when actually there are no cheap products out there, and therefore we have no choice but to dispense more expensive medication. There is something in there around efficiency, so that's just setting out that actually this financial year we had a challenge of around £15.4 million of efficiency in order that we delivered break even. 3 million of that would be delivered through prescribing efficiencies, so that's things like changing to generic drugs and other kind of cost-effective prescribing. We have delivered against that target, and we will deliver the £15.4 million, but the 12 million of that is basically non-recurrent, so it's everything that we've done is a one-off, which will cause us again further challenges as we move into next year. I'll not cover much on 23-24 planning. There's nothing much in the paper anyway, because the slides that the finance leads are going to present will take us into that position. And just in summary, we will deliver against the ICB and ICS trajectories. I don't anticipate any issues in relation to that. It will need to be very tightly managed as we approach, well, 31st of March tomorrow. So as we work into next week, we'll be very kind of pressing in terms of how we do manage that position, particularly because this will be the first year that we've effectively managed as one system. So we're not just managing one organisation, we're managing 8 organisations in that space. So it is going to be very challenging, very difficult. So in summary, the positions presented here for information and assurance, and just to know the kind of, I suppose, the critical work that we do need to take forward as a place committee for next financial year, in order that we have some robust, tangible efficiency savings to be able to push ourselves to close our financial gap for next year. Applause. And take any questions.
All right, any questions, Richard?
That's really helpful, but also quite concerning about the non-recurrency of the efficiency program. So from a hospital point of view, you know, we try and get our recurrency as high as possible for obvious reasons. I think I'd be in a bit of trouble with my board if we were, I think like you described, 80% non-recurrent. That was a recurrent Barnsley CCG problem, which led us to some difficult conversations a couple of years ago, didn't it? Which none of us probably look back fondly on. That's going to cause us, that's 12 million more carried forward as problem defined. So I guess the challenge is, why can't we make those recurrent? Why, if people are giving it up this year, why can't they give it up permanently? If we don't get into the habit of recurrent cost improvements, we will just have an escalating financial problem year on year.
So the majority of that non-recurrent was not through reducing any reduction in contracts or services. So it's probably fair to say, Richard, that to get that recurrently within the ICB now would mean we would have to reduce contract values with our providers. So that is the because essentially we have prescribing, continuing healthcare are the 2 bits of the ICB that we can control expenditure. The rest are contracts with the acute sector, mental health, community, primary care.
Back on that just briefly. So previous year, you know, in the old world, we would have services re-tendered at lower value, and but their work wasn't done in the place to find service models that were more effective and cheaper. The approach was just to re-tender at a lower contract value. And so I'd be really reluctant if we get back into that space. I would hope that one of the opportunities of integration is that we can look at pathways between the different partners, redesign them into what's right for patients, and take out cost by having more efficient pathways. So how are we going to do that?
Yeah. That's the next that's the next set of slides, and you are absolutely right. Nobody wants to go back to that 1920 conversation that we had in this very room.
Yeah, I remember it well.
So I think you're absolutely right, and we do need to think differently, and we need to think how best we use. So one of the things that I wrote on a post-it note yesterday was, let's think about this as one budget. So how are we going to deploy the resource we get in Barnsley to deliver what's right for our people?
That's our principle, isn't it? I think that's the principle we all supported yesterday, and I think it's the right principle. You know, salami slicing is going to take us nowhere, but we do think that there are opportunities to be, if we use our creative souls more effectively, to think differently. So I think, Roxanne, do you want to take us into the next set of slides?
Yeah. So, well, I'll hand over to Robert and Louise to take us through and provide us with an update. So finance, at the January Place Committee, members of the committee asked to see a next year's financial position and what that looked like. I'd just like to say this is a starter for 10. We are still in the midst of planning, and numbers are moving all the time. So this is very, very draft still in terms of what is being presented here, but I think it's probably fair to say that it'll give us a fair idea of the challenge that's ahead of us. I think we'll start to hopefully get into the conversation about actually how we're going to do things differently around here then, if we are going to have any kind of chance of closing that gap. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute we'll reduce the deficit down to 0, but what are we going to do collectively that will mean that we can close that gap and close that position? So I will hand over to, I'm not sure who's presenting, Louise or Robert, so I'll hand over to one of you to take us through the slides.
Thanks, Roxanne. Right, I'm going to start. I'm just going to take us through the draft financial plan that we submitted at the end of February, and then I'll hand over to Rob. So, as Roxanne has just mentioned, this is very much a draft position as at the end of February that I'm presenting here. We did submit final plans this morning, and there has been an improvement in the position between what was reported here and what was submitted this morning. So I will reference that as I go through the slides. So in terms of the position that we're presenting here today, I just wanted to reference that for BNBC, it includes any health related services within their plan. For Swift, it reports the full organisation position, not just the Barnsley element, and it also includes the provider collaborative element of Swift as well. And we have adjusted the position to show the income and expenditure between partner organisations. So overall, based on that, as at the draft, we were showing a deficit position of 52 million, which is approximately 4.3% of the overall income allocation that we receive as a place. The underlying recurrent position of that is slightly worse, and that's as a result of non-recurrent savings expected in Swift as a result of vacancies as well. So if we can flick to the next slide, please. So just pictorially, this shows a breakdown of the income and expenditure for the Barnsley Place based on the principles I've just outlined, and overall just showing that deficit. So we can move to, thank you. So overall, got a breakdown by partner organisation. I did just want to reference on the contract line under expenditure that this also includes prescribing, continuing healthcare. So there is an element of risk here. It's not covered by contracts, and we can split that out further if that's needed. So since we submitted this position, there has been an improvement in both the ICB and the hospital position. Swift continued to report a break-even position for the final plans, and I believe that the NBC continued to report a break-even position. Presentationally here, BNBC shows an 8 million deficit, and again that's part of their efficiency challenge that they need to find. So we can click to the next slide. If that's okay. So again, this is an outline of the efficiencies by each partner organisation. A lot of the improvement in the deficit position is the result of increasing this efficiency position, in particular in the ICB at the hospital. Again, that gives some element of risk. A lot of that efficiency programme is yet unidentified. So it does give an element of risk. So I'm going to hand over to Rob at this point.
Cheers, Louise. Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of we've put together some assumptions around how we included in plans around anticipated inflation, pay, non-pay, and growth. A further breakdown will be provided on final plans. So Roxanne and Louise have already said, this morning, we've already submitted what is deemed to be final plan, but I think we all acknowledge there'll be at least another round in terms of submission, given what system positions and probably what the national position still looks like at this stage. In terms of risks, acknowledging risks, so a lot of those have, if you like, come through from what were reported in 22-23. So Roxanne has already touched on what is some of the issues around prescribing, continuing healthcare, complex cases. In addition to that, for 22-23, as a place, we identified workforce as being one of those key risks. So that is both the recruitment, retention of our staff, but also current levels of sickness and the cost that we're incurring around temporary staff solutions. And then, as Louise has sort of shown you on the previous slide, at draft plan stage, we already had sort of 23.5 million efficiency. That has grown in terms of sort of final plan submissions. But a key risk for us as individual organisations, but also as a place, is around how do we go about achieving that efficiency target. Next slide, please. So next steps. So when we put all this together, we were all working quite industrially around sort of finalising the NHS financial plan. So in terms of the council, they've already had their budgets for this year approved, and you know, so they're sort of fixed at this point. So it's the 3 NHS organisations that have continued working on the financial plans for 23-24, resulting into today's submission. But then the emphasis is still around reducing the overall financial deficit and focusing on how we can sort of reduce costs on a recurrent basis. So as we've sort of mentioned, as we've worked towards those final plans, there's been quite a bit of emphasis around the efficiency targets, the efficiency stretch. So from a South Yorkshire ICB perspective, looking at sort of place achieving something like a 2% efficiency on programme allocations, but then a request that the providers, so i.e. the hospital, looks at increasing to 4%, and that is 4% is the level that has gone in on the final plan submission. So then to work that we need to be cracking on with for 23-24. So as Louise has mentioned, so at the moment, Swift, we're reporting the total position for the organisation, and there's work ongoing around breaking that down into what is the element that relates to Barnsley and Barnsley only. And the methodology behind that will be shared as we work through that for transparency. Once we've got some final plans, I'm reticent to say that we've achieved final plan. Once we've got some final plans for 23-24, then I think then there's some work for us to do around sort of medium to long-term financial planning as well, to get us on to the best possible footing going forward, and around sustainability. And I suppose a recurrent theme of what we've been talking around is then sort of doing a collective review of potential efficiency savings, efficiency targets, and particularly highlighting links between activity and finance. And whilst there's some things we can do as individual organisations to achieve certain elements of that, it's how do we come together as a place and work jointly towards, you know, that sort of greater piece and that bigger efficiency challenge. So next, so that this is just the key assumptions. I mean, I weren't going to really go into it, but it's there if any, you know, for information purposes at this stage. So that's the end of the presentation we're going to give this afternoon. Just if there's any questions.
Well, that's to say, I mean, thank you, Robert, and thank you, Louise, for joining us today and your ongoing work as a finance team to help us to navigate this complexity that faces us all. So we do appreciate that. Let's just open up for any questions or reflections.
Sorry, talking too much.
Oh, no, apologies.
I mean, it'd be really helpful to get the slides shared. It's quite hard to read them from here in the room.
Yeah, I'll read that.
Fine. So I thought they were updated. You said okay. So are all of local providers doing 4% then? That's the ask that the ICB has put on us.
Yeah.
And we've moved to there. Rotherham's moved to there. The Children's Hospital's moved to there. Can't speak for Doncaster and Sheffield.
I believe they have. So I believe they have. The latest update I had as at yesterday morning was that there was still work. So Doncaster have, but there is still work to do with the Doncaster position.
Sorry, my question was about Barnsley partners.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I know.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sorry. So no, that's not the case then for the Barnsley partners.
So what's the challenge there in terms of moving us to that position?
Well, the Swift are in the
West
Yorkshire footprint.
Our efficiency has to go 3.8% then.
So you're at 3.8.
3.8.
Yeah.
For the West Yorkshire.
It's interesting because the South Yorkshire ICB team have been talking about West Yorkshire being ahead of South Yorkshire in terms of the amount of cost improvement, and that when we were at 3% in South Yorkshire, we needed to move further because West Yorkshire ahead looks like we've gone past you then.
Don't know what the position in West Yorkshire in totality looks like.
Adrian was there yesterday. The finance director at Swift was saying that all the mental health providers in West Yorkshire have submitted a break-even plan. But the providers in South Yorkshire have submitted deficit plans.
Yeah, my understanding. So there's a bit of a challenge, I think, in the conversation.
There's going to be a check and challenge with Swift and Sheffield Health and Social Care, R-Dash, and Sheffield Children's Hospital around mental health provision, because the South Yorkshire, particularly R-Dash, are saying that they can't get to a break-even position.
I mean, from my point of view, people can't get to a break-even position, so that's to be worked through. But getting to a break-even position, in my view, shouldn't stop the financial efforts to work as a system. Some people have to have surpluses, if other people have got deficits. So hitting break-even isn't necessarily a mark of success. It may more reflect favourable allocations and the environment that trust is in. Having a universal approach to cost improvements may be a way of sharing an equivalent amount of financial effort and risk, I guess. Hence, I think we should look to equilibrate our cost improvement percentages.
Helpful feedback. I mean, fundamentally, it does come down to is corralling action, doesn't it, against the place? I mean, you've got to enumerate the place delivery plan fundamentally, haven't we? There's no two ways about it. That's got to be the case, hasn't it? Sorry, got the next slide. Shut up. Go on, let's keep going.
So just in terms of next steps then, and I didn't have this as an agenda and it hasn't been circulated with the pack, so this will come out after the meeting because I have just literally finished this 5 minutes before the meeting, but it has been shared with directors of finance. Following on from some of the discussions then, partnerships delivery group were presented with a set of options to consider in terms of how then we look to close the gap across Barnsley. A number of options were considered. One was kind of actually work through the place plan, see what we can deliver through efficiencies, through improved productivity, and how best to make use of the resource we get. The other option was just to apply a target cost reduction, which, going back to Richard's point 5-10 minutes ago, actually to do that it just feels very high level. Actually, what will we do that will make a difference? All that does is move one problem from one part of the system to another part of the system. So actually we want to avoid that in terms of an option. And then looking at where we can get further and deeper integration and how that might deliver us some efficiency if we were to work more effectively together. So they were considered at the partnership programme delivery group. I wasn't there because I was on leave, but that was what was discussed. Following on from that, we then had a further meeting last Friday, which Bob was present, Jill, and a number of other, James, you were there, another of other individuals. And we then discussed actually, how did we want to approach this? So if we can move on to the next slide page. So what I've tried to do is kind of pull together what I think we agreed at that meeting last Friday. So we said we wanted to actually put some meat on the bones in terms of the place plan, work through what we expected the impact of that to actually be, when we thought that impact might then materialise, whether that be in this financial year or in a future financial year, whether there were any double running costs, whether we needed to think about any other opportunities. We also said we wanted to assess value for money across everything we do. So So that's a piece of work and action we need to take forward. We said we would want to take an assessment of all our discretionary spend. So this is looking at everything that's not statutorily required in our system. There's some significant risk to that because that spend and expenditure may be supporting other parts of the system, and actually there's huge risk if we were to consider that. But I think just transparently laying that out for everyone to see is really important. Review what the opportunities are in terms of working together more deeply, and then think about any other ideas which we asked people to kind of, and Jill did send an email after the meeting, just thinking and reflecting on other ideas that people may have and taking those forward, but in a very manageable way. And that does link back slightly to yesterday's conversation, in that if you think too big, we'll never deliver anything because we're so busy writing a big, lovely, glossy plan that we'll never actually put anything into reality. So the work we're going to take forward is basically during the next 2 weeks, the plans are going to be granular detail. We're going to identify programme leads, project leads. We need to identify the senior responsible officers, and that potentially is people in this room that are not necessarily all sat within the ICB. That needs to be owned across the partnership. We need to, the information around discretionary spend will all be shared. So that's going into SMT a week, 2 weeks today. So that will come into the next meeting. And then there needs to be some smaller conversations around what we think the shared opportunities are and the deeper integration work that we need to take forward. And I've put in a timeline there that essentially we need to have undertaken all of that and be able to articulate the impact of all of that work by the time we get to the end of June, which is a fairly big ask. But the word that for me now is pace. We've got a plan. We need to turn it into reality, because if that plan doesn't do what we think it's going to do or have the impact that we think it's going to have, then we need to go back and rethink. And we need to do that in a very responsive way. So we can't be sat here in 12 months talking about Barnsley Place plan with still just words on a piece of paper. So my view on that is that all that work is undertaken with a full report brought back into this group in July that sets out clearly what actions we're going to take and the impact it will have. And I've suggested in here that the Place Partnership Delivery Group take responsibility for ensuring that those actions are undertaken. Whether that's right or not is up for debate here today, but that's what I've kind of set out in the slide, and I will share the slide deck after this meeting. So I'll stop.
Thank you. I think it's a comprehensive update that we wanted to bring you in today. It's not easy to read through, is it? But nevertheless, it's our collective leadership task, isn't it, here today, and others that work alongside us at our leadership team to rise to the challenge and make it so, and try to stick to our strategic imperatives in doing so, and our strategic ambitions, really. So I think that's, again, thanks Roxanne and the team for bringing that forward. And again, let's open it up for any further reflections. Jill, James, Bob, myself, we've all been part of this conversation. We've all got it to this point in time. So there should be nothing that we're seeing on the screen that any of us don't recognise, because that's been our conversation. We just played back the conversation that we've had into here. So I welcome your reflections, or anybody's reflections. If there's something that we've missed in terms of the strategy, please do say, you know, you've got it all wrong and you need to do an X, Y, and Z instead. Just say it. No point in anything else.
I just want to note I've had a very long list of ideas at the meeting, way longer than Jill's. I think Dave Ramsey's on the Teams call made a really good point. Is you know, it's an honest conversation. It's saying how much should be focused at during the year, and I think the stuff that Roxana's talking about, the challenge she's putting in, is a fair one. Is how much is it being baked into the plans? How much was an ask at the start of last year to say you've got to take money out of this to get money to the right place? And I think starting off that way with appropriate, robust QIA, processes, looking at it's not disrupting other service, all those sort of assurance checks that we need to have in place as well. It does feel like, so as a provider, you got to say 4% on top of whatever last year, on top of higher demand, all the rest of it, and then do this. So it does feel tough, but it's right. And we did have a really positive conversation yesterday about things that we could do together, and we don't have to start the far right. We could just start, by bringing teams together and helping them generate ideas and think about how we can do things once, be clear with the public about what we're doing. And there's a number of ideas in the plan already where our teams we've been speaking to are very excited about things like the family centres, stuff we can do around frailty. So there's a lot of opportunities in there anyway.
We must keep hopeful, keep hopeful vein to this really, because
Yeah,
it's not all about war is always in
No,
you can apply a real creative mind to this if we so choose to do so.
Sorry, one last thing is just on that call, there was a colleague from the council on there, and she said you're not talking about integrating when you be talking about ideas, you're not talking about integration enough. And I think it was Linda, wasn't it? And it's because we're all different organisations. It's not just different teams, it's different organisations, and we've just got to get over that.
Jill, did you want to come in next? And Sheena wants to come in.
Yeah, I suppose one of my reflections, and it's a bit of feedback from yesterday as well in terms of that timeout, and it did make me think a little bit about how we've approached things as a collective before. We talked about COVID, which were a bit pretty unusual, but actually, the call to action around winter and the crisis, cost of living crisis, actually we should be applying the same rigour around this and our approach of it, how we get together collectively and come up with the solutions that we can all agree across the patch, instead of in our separate organisations where sometimes then you make a decision and the impact lands somewhere else for somebody else to pick up. So I think I like the feeling that we got out yesterday around actually how we should approach this. And we started that last Friday, really, didn't we?
We did. So we continued on conversation. Sheena.
Yeah, so that all sounds really positive and encouraging in terms of a new way of working, because I think our first year was an initial, right, okay, this is a change, but actually probably not much change happened. It was just a status quo, whereas I think this year is an opportunity for us, isn't it, to think about how we do things differently. So that all sounds really encouraging. I suppose there's still a lot of work to do, isn't there, really? So it feels like when it comes back to us at some point, it'd be good to see it sit alongside performance and our delivery plan around, how those, because it's no good just kind of slicing and dicing, is it? It's got to be about what we want to achieve as a place. I think the other thing, for my information, and again, you might all know this, I don't, is where does primary care sit in all of this? So I can see, obviously, the ICB, the hospital and Swift and the council, but where does primary care sit in that? Because I think the principles of working differently might mean that we need to think about how we, work alongside better and differently with our primary care colleagues, but also it might be about, applying some of those principles that we're applying to some of providers across the board in a transparent way. And if not, understanding why not, really, I guess.
Yeah. Completely support that. We do want to, and Max wants to come in, we do want to get to a point where we have a really deep and rich understanding together as leaders about money, outcomes, impacts, all of that sort of thing, because in doing so, we can feel collectively confident that our lines of inquiry are the right ones. And I think that's the space I want us to get to. And it is rapid. We've got a rapid piece of work to do. So we'll need all of you to really put our shoulders to the mast. But did you want to come back on primary care?
Yeah, just on the primary care bit. So I think just to add, actually, so we've presented today, obviously, the partnership position, but there was clearly 2 members of the partnership not included in that information. So our plan is to widen that out to the hospice, to primary care. So there will be more, richer information. I mean, primary care contracting was in the ICB contract line. So it's in there. And it's about £50 million. So, roughly speaking, that's all the primary care contracts, including the nationally mandated contracts. So I think it's just how we all own that, because one of the pieces of information that I will bring as well into the partnership is how the cake is essentially sliced in terms of what we spend in Barnsley and how we spend it, in which sector. because I think that might help as well, the partners to understand that kind of expenditure flow across the system. There's lots of work to do in terms of finance. I think we've got a really good, I don't know whether Robert and Louise are still there, but you know, really good team kind of working together now in a really transparent way, which, you know, 6 months ago we didn't have. So I think that's, you know, a credit to them in terms of coming together to produce that information to present here today. So just say thank you, Robert, and thanks to that group. That's much appreciated.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for joining us today, Robert and Louise. Very much appreciated your work. I think the other thing we should note alongside this is the running cost allowance. There's no point pretending that doesn't exist, because it does. So there is a challenge, isn't there? Another challenge, which you find a different word. Anyway, there's another piece of work to do, which is about how the ICB as an organisation is going to what's the strategy for tackling running cost allowance fundamentally. So there's obviously further conversations. Roxanne, you need to scoot off. So thank you for your leadership on this. It's very much appreciated. But can we record that in terms of the slides that you've seen, that you are supportive of the strategy that we're sharing with you today?
Yeah.
Do you share the slides, please?
Thank you very much. I equally need to go as well. Sorry, this is terrible, isn't it? I feel really bad to go and join another meeting. So I'm going to pass on to Jamie, if you can pick up, and I'll only be half an hour. I should be back for 3.
I think now we're on item 12, aren't we?
Right, okay, that's nice.
Well,
Yeah, so, thanks, Jamie. I think probably most of it has been covered in terms of some of the things that we've already talked about already. So Kirsty obviously gave a little flavour of the fact that we were developing the ICP strategy. And actually, in terms of some of the questions from members of the public, did involve quite an extensive engagement piece of people with lived experience and existing research and engagement, and also some additional engagement as a result of the conversation around what matters to you around your health and well-being. So I think that conversation started as part of the development of the strategy, and we had an update on that because I think that's been the primary work of the partnership since it started, really, and it culminated at the meeting last week, which was around the launch week of the strategy. And again, we've already heard from Kirsty around some of the things that were happening around that in relation to that, and we had an update at that event around the launch. And I think there's a toolkit in place which I'm sure colleagues have already seen, but if not, it might be useful to circulate, because I think the conversation continues really around that engagement. So it's the launch of the strategy is one thing, but I think the continued conversation was the message around what we still need to talk to our public and communities around. There was also a update in terms of a joint commitment around tackling racism across the system and across South Yorkshire. So again, that statement was put to the Integrated Care Partnership for approval and was agreed. And I think it was recognised about how important it is in relation to the statement that sort of sets that out. There was a development session after the ICP meeting in public as well, which I wasn't part of. I don't know if anybody else was involved in that, but most of that centred around the Bloomberg work and giving an update around health inequalities and the plan for early years and how that is linked into the places. And again, I think that was generally agreed, and that might be worth circulating the slides from that as well, so I can send those on. That's probably it.
thank you. So any questions for Sheena on that update? We've also got on the agenda the strategy, haven't we? Which has got you, Sheena, Wendy, who's not going to be able to do a little bit, and you, Kirsty. So I don't know how we're going to play that in.
I think we probably covered it actually in what we said. Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I was going to perhaps pick up is the toolkit that you mentioned, Sheena. So the App Future South Yorkshire there's a toolkit that goes with it. And it perhaps picks up a little bit on one of the questions and reflections we had from Pete earlier, is about how do we make this real for people? How do we make this real for the people that we're working with? How do we make it real for members of the public? And that perhaps is one way of doing that. You know, it's not about a strategy plan that sits on a shelf. This is about real people and how our aspirations and how our wishes of either what we're doing now or in the future might make things better for our local communities. So that's perhaps one way of thinking about it. And I know, like I say, colleagues have been doing various, you know, road shows, different things in blogs, briefs, you know, doing videos, etc. But it's an ongoing conversation. It doesn't stop with we've launched a strategy next week, let's do a bit in our internal newsletter. This is an ongoing piece of work. So from a comms team's point of view, our comms teams, collective comms teams will be driving some of that activity, but I think that the power comes from the leadership and us all owning it. So that's sort of the words I'd leave you with on that one, and we can definitely share the toolkit around. It will be in your organisations, but some creative ways of thinking about how we have those conversations. And if people are interested, you know, we're really keen to get out and have those conversations in local communities as well. And if you want to come with us and join us on those, and come out into local communities and have some of those chats and meet people, in addition to, you know, what you're already doing, then we would really welcome that.
One other thing I was going to mention was that, and this sort of prompted me when from questions from the public as well, is that as part of the strategy we did a big engagement piece, and obviously you know, there was a lot of work that went into that, and then there was a little video that was produced on the back of that which highlighted the priorities that the public had said are important to them, which access was one of the kind of key asks. I think it'd be good to circulate that to colleagues, just as a reminder of what came out of that engagement, because I think it just keeps it up front and central around what are the things that are important to people. And in that big engagement piece, what did people say was important to them about their health and well-being? So I don't know if that's something you've got access to.
Yeah, we can definitely do. And it picks up on that. You know, you've said we've listened, we've done, we did. That's the really important bit, isn't it? Closing that loop and having that continuous conversation so we can evidence that in our plans and in those conversations. So yeah, we can get that circulated.
Well, yeah, just an observation on this. I think that you said and we did stuff is great because you're playing it back to people that are already engaged, and it's great. And you know, and I think different people have done different things. We went to meet the community midwives, and we had a really positive conversation about family centres that was them actually telling us what was going on and how the council, you know, bringing everything together and all the rest of it and stuff. So the conversation on specifics are quite easy. It's the how does it all work conversation that's a real struggle, because we've had STPs and ACSs and ICSs and ICBs and ICPs, and by the time you finish explaining all the different things, people are lost. You know, I agree with the points that were made earlier. But actually, they do care about the things. How does it play into my world and my service? And you know, different people are going to have a. Yeah, you work in ED, you might have a broader view of a primary care or a community nurse. You're going to have a health visit. You're going to have a wider view on it. Some people are quite focused in on how does it help me, you know, and the stuff. So I think we've all got the toolkit. I think probably just a reflection really, and it's not. Is how are we building our communication? So this is, you know, we finalised the plan. These are the priorities, but it's that bit about how does it all work? We probably just need to spend a bit more time on, don't we? And involve, you know, you'll have it planned already, but just involve more people. I think because that's the bit that's challenging with people. They're not interested. It's just, you know, it just seems to change all the time.
Yeah, and actually, you know, what the deck chairs look like and the way they're set out is in effect something that, you know, a much smaller group of people are interested in.
Yeah.
You're interested in how does this affect me? You know, you start with yourself, don't you, and you work outwards. And just reflecting on one of the on the place partnership update where there was a slide you pointed, didn't you, and said, and it said, what have we done? What difference is it making? And why does it matter? And it's some of those things, isn't it? And if we can describe it, so like Sheena, you said about actually some of the things that people said were important were access. we talk about it in those terms. We don't talk about it, oh, the ICB or the partnership that's done. It's the how are we making a difference to you getting an appointment when you need it or whatever it might be. So
Really like the partnership news that Gina sends out. You just sign up to it and alert through the council website and stuff like that. But then it's people just being switched on to that because it's a really straightforward way of explaining it. You just rely on email and stuff, but there is some good stuff out there that we're already doing.
I think as well, I think it was a fair challenge about about the website and the information that's on there, and I accept that not everyone's got a digital access, but for those that do, that want to find the information that is out there, we probably don't make it very easy, really. And I suppose there's the things that would be helpful around place and this board, for example, but then there's all the things from our partnership as well that would be useful to be on there. So, you know, we have our governors, for example, in terms of engagement around, I'm sure there's lots of other examples from other providers, and, you know, our meetings are going to be held back in public again. So again, it's about, you know, so where do people want to go to access that information and to sort of highlight issues that are important to them that they feel are not being heard elsewhere. So I think there's more that we can do around that to make sure that that's accessible and informative for those that want to use access to digital content in that way.
Okay, thank you. And I think, you know, it's a culmination of quite a lot of work over a relatively short time, hasn't it, to get to that final strategy. And I think when you look at it, the big bold ambitions that are in there, the areas that we focus on, we all sign up to. And when we come onto the item around first plan, I think we've tried in doing that as partners to identify areas that link across to that ICP strategy. I think referencing how we engage and involve with our service users, members of the public on the specific aspects of that is one of the things, as well as looking at where it gives us the opportunity for some efficiencies that we need to bear in mind. I think taking the challenge that we've had earlier this morning. So I'll move us along. The next item, and it feels because we've moved some things around now that the floor's not quite well, some of this stuff, so apologies for that. But a break, yeah, it's after.
I think we've done half an hour.
Are we beyond? No, the break we're at 2:40. On my agenda. 2:33. I'll keep us. I'll keep this relatively quick. And so Roxana's done a bit on the finance, and colleagues on the financial plan. We've been working up until today on the operational plans. So these are NHS operational plans, responding to the guidance that came out just before Christmas, that set out the 31 objectives that we would be expected to work towards, alongside continuing in effect to work towards the other expectations set out in the long-term plan previously. The submission had to be in by today. I will just share on the screen quickly just some headlines against them 31 objectives. I'll share a bit more detail with people afterwards, and this is as we've come together as South Yorkshire. So just bear with me, let me try and get this on. Apologies for size. Hopefully it got bigger. Well, we can't see it, so it's pretty pointless. But I'll tell you what it says. So operational planning, the objectives, they're under a number of areas. So urgent and emergency care, achieving the expectation around 4-hour waits, which is 76% in this year. Previously used to be 95. We've not been there for a while across the system, but all places, all providers of A&E services have included plans to achieve that by the end of this year. And Richard, I think you were sort of pushing us a little bit harder through the Urgent Care Alliance, weren't you, to try and make sure that we get to a position where we're starting to achieve consistently that position earlier in the year, given the pressures in
Definitely.
given the pressures of winter.
Quoted September.
So that's positive, and our plans are to deliver that. Likewise, for ambulance response times and some improvement there. And there was an ask around bed occupancy and looking to reduce bed occupancy across the system, so that again, during periods of surge and pressure and winter, we can manage that. So again, the South Yorkshire plan is to achieve that target of 92%, will be 91. It's probably worth us saying that in Barnsley, that's a real challenge for us, and we might not get Barnsley Hospital to 92%, because this year we've been operating above 100. So our beds, there's been more than that open pretty much all year, hasn't there? And reducing down is a challenge. There is some additional bed funding, but it's not what we would have what we wanted to maximise that improvement. So that's in there. Around community health services, the target around urgent community response, we're on track to achieve. There are a couple under community where we're not quite there. So one is in relation to the ability to deliver our share of 50 million more GP appointments. So as an ICB, our share, I can't remember the exact number, but our plans taking account of all of the countable GP appointment activity. So including extended hours, including the use of the new additional roles that have been allowed, takes us to 97% of that. So it is a big increase in terms of appointments we'd expect to see. Doesn't quite get us there, so there might be some challenge and pushback around that. And that's all places other than Rotherham, I think, who, because of their model, can count more appointments, but one we need to look into. And then the other, which is what Wendy's just talking about now, so it's around dental activity, which up until Saturday is not the responsibility of the ICP to commission. It's previously been sat with NHS England, but does come to us, and that is around getting activity back up to pre-pandemic levels. So there's some work around that to do. Around elective care, the key really was in support elective recovery, reduce waiting lists. I think there's a good news story in this one for us, but also as a system. So delivering the amount of activity required across South Yorkshire, the plan is to do that now, which is over and above what we delivered in 1920. And I think the key element of that is, as well as delivering the activity, putting a real focus on and reducing long waiters. And across South Yorkshire, there are people who are still waiting significant amount of times. That's the better position from Barnsley. So we're not seeing waits now over 78 weeks, which will come onto in the performance report. We expect to not have anybody waiting over 65, which will target by the end of next year. Actually, 52 is down. I think if we reflect back to pre-pandemic, we used to talk about people waiting 18 weeks, didn't we, and perform really well. So there's still some way to go on that elective recovery, but we'll deliver against the plans. Cancer, around 62 days from referral to receiving treatment, and the faster diagnosis targets we are planning to achieve. Again, we'll touch on that in the performance report. All the indicators around diagnostic performance we plan to meet. There are some challenging areas in relation to mental health. So the expected amount of access to mental health support for children and young people, so this is about the number of contacts of children and young people, is not quite at the target that would be our sort of share. So there's an area there that we need to focus on, and how we increase that. Work that we've done through Chili Pep, Compass in schools and other things is providing us some more. That's not at the moment counted fully in our activity. So we've got commission services that might not be reflected in the numbers. So there's something about that to work through. IAPT across all South Yorkshire, access to IAPT as we've seen it over this last year and the years before. And this is about referrals. It's not got to where we would expect. That's unusual. IAPT is talking therapies for people that are not aware of that initial sort of lower level. The numbers haven't come through for those services as you would expect. But the crisis services, we're getting to it for people that we've not seen previously. So I think that they're looking at some rebranding, but I think there's something about how we make an awareness of that service, because there's seems to have a strange name, doesn't it, when you talk about IAPT and what that means. And inappropriate out of area placements, which we touched on earlier around out of area placements. The Barnsley position is better than others, but across South Yorkshire, that is still a challenge for us. From a learning disabilities perspective, annual health checks, positive, achieving the target over the next year. I guess it's worth just flagging a good news position. So from the Barnsley perspective, the number of people aged 14 and over with learning disabilities who are on a register who have had their annual health check is the highest that it has ever been. It's the highest in South Yorkshire, above, I think, 80% now. And I think we've got 1 or 2 GP practices who 100% of their ones not that far away, 100% of their LD patients who have had their annual health check. So that's a real positive, and we'll keep pushing there. And likewise around the transforming care and moving people out of institutionalised accommodation with learning disabilities back into more community-based care. We've got plans around that and to achieve. So I think they're the headlines. I'll share that slide round, and there's some more detail about each of the places as well. So a number of areas I don't think are surprising where we've got some challenge. But overall, I think relatively positive in terms of what we hope to achieve next year. So that were operational plan, Wendy, and I'll pause and take any comments or questions on that. Can't change it because it's been submitted, but I can take any questions.
Questions? No, just an observation for me. It's just a point really about the UCR activity, because I know other areas got quite a lot of investment to set up new services. We've re-provided ours, I suppose, from the rapid response team that we had, and we're above 80% against that 70% target in terms of achieving that 2 hour. We want to push that further because it's really important that we do that. But also our activity levels are greater than other areas. And actually our service model is not fully implemented yet. So we're hoping to make even more improvements on that in terms of proactive care. And we're the only area in South Yorkshire that is providing that 24/7 as well. So I think that's a real positive for us in Barnsley. There's more to do, but I think it's really positive in terms of both activity levels and achieving the target. Right, Richard.
I think there's something we need to think about, but more about the bed occupancy thing. I don't like expressing it in terms of core bed base, because of course the bed base isn't the same all year round.
Yeah.
So we should be looking at 92% of whatever the appropriate bed base is in winter versus summer. So then the idea being you've always got some empty beds then that you can move patients to. Given that we've got great discharge processes, we've got the best virtual ward uptake in South Yorkshire, we've got really good SDEC utilisation, then you start to wonder then what more efficiency there is to do to drive those beds out. So I think it is telling us there is a shortfall of beds. So I think if we don't do that, then we'll end up struggling to give people timely care there. So I think I don't think we should just accept that we can't do that.
Yeah, no, that's right, Richard. And the plan that we'd submitted initially included some investment for the provision of, I can't remember the exact number now, but additional beds, and the available funding will only allow us to do half of that, won't it? So doesn't quite take us there unless, as a system, through any other discharge funding or other allocations, we can do something.
The consequence of that then is A&E performance will be more difficult. People wait longer for beds. whether we can take patients from other areas for mutual aid in terms of elective care if those beds aren't available. Those things need thinking through.
In terms of transparency, so we're having some discussions about that internally about, well, what's the escalation funding, what's this extra money, what are we spending anyway on escalation beds all year. So we're having discussions about how our beds are configured, how we staff them appropriately and safely, but how we become more efficient. Generally, like there's still opportunities for us as an organisation, but also as a place really around that sort of stuff, which we can take through the urgent care board as well as partners.
Anything else? Any other reflections on that? You're next as well, aren't you, Jamie? Then we've got the health and care plan, including integrated care review.
And this is it's a bit of a two-part thing. And what I didn't want to do is bring back another version this month of the slides setting out the priorities. We had a development session in February. I think we received some really helpful feedback around steps, around priorities, and being really clear around what the impact. So I just provided a bit of an update in the paper around our next steps. I think what's probably not clear enough in the bullet points on here is the element that we've just been talking around in terms of really drilling down into all of those plans and looking at where will they deliver efficiencies, whether that be work that we're doing with EKIS around the front door and potential options there at the hospital, whether it be intermediate care, whether it be stuff that we're doing out in the community around frailty, and that might not be about reducing the cost of a service, but hopefully it reduces the impact in terms of people needing our services and the costs associated with that. So the next steps are set out there. I smiled, Wendy, when you said we'd just been around all of the boards and finished in terms of signing off the governance, because I think when we look at our plan and the priorities, we do just need to check that we've got the right mechanisms for taking those forward. We've got the place delivery group, which clearly is where we'll sit things, but underneath that we've got urgent care board, planned care board, care closer to home. Bob, you and I have talked about, and Wendy, there's some of the overlap. Some things that have been care closer to home are about, community-based services, but urgent community response, other things. So how do we bring that together? So there might be some tweaks in that sort of lower down. So that's where we're at with the plan, and just noting in there the intention that at April's partnership group and place committee, we'll be looking to bring the final version of the plan, and I mean the version that will be published with them headlines and the priorities, glossy version, and obviously what sits underneath that in terms of the detail. So that's the plan. And then wanted to bring in just an update around intermediate care. And so I thought it were helpful just to show it here, really, because one of the priorities within our plan is around intermediate care, making sure that we've got a model that supports people to be able to step up into appropriate care and support that might avoid an hospital admission, but likewise people who have been in hospital need rehabilitation, access through into that support, either in a bed if that's appropriate, or in their own home, which we hope is the most appropriate and where we can push that forward. Just a reminder, again, I've shared a couple of documents, but a reminder that this is something that we flagged into here around the risk. There were a number of triggers that it's probably worth just reflecting on. One being the current facilities that we've got. So we've got a 30-bedded unit that has perhaps got enough capacity, but it's also been identified and flagged in here. But also, I think in the hospital and through your boards as the provider of that element of service, that building is not really fit for purpose, and we need to identify further the number of spot purchase beds that we've got in place at the moment and are having to use, that is then having a knock-on effect in terms of neighbourhood rehab services and their ability to provide the fact that through the year we've been providing care in people's homes over and above what we commissioned SWIFT to do. and a number of others. So that triggered the review. We agreed that to do that and to do that in a sort of timely manner, we would bring in some independent support. So what I've shared with you is the sort of scope of the work that Empower are doing and the last highlight report, which was at last week. So that's just there for information. I've met them this morning, so there have been some delays around data, and that's flagged on the highlight report that was shared. They have now got all of that, and I think that just a bit of shuffling round of when they were planning to do certain activities. They will be able to conclude the review at the time that they expected, which is towards the end of May. And next week we've got a workshop where they're playing back to us some of this is how the model is now and how it works. And to start to think about that looking forward, where would we see some differences? So the paper's there, people can see it. I think it's probably worth flagging that whilst building for the unit is a concern, what we haven't asked people supporting us to do is to identify an alternative building. I think that's for us as a partnership, for us as a place team. But what has come out from the work that they've done so far, I think, is confirmation, which we wouldn't have expected any other way, but confirmation that building doesn't now best meet the needs of the people that are using it. That's all I wanted to say on there.
Thank you. So it's progressing pretty well. I think the people in this room are involved in those conversations. Obviously, what we want is a target operator model coming out of this, really, and then empower exploration of estates enablers, which we think could be some lines of inquiry to try and tackle the challenge around the environment that is not ideal for either the individuals who use it nor indeed those that work in it. So we want to try and make sure that we do that as part of this review and have some options to bring forward. Thank you, Jamie. Is there any questions, by the way? Okay, item 16 then. Barnsley Primary Care Practice Delivery Agreement.
Just, we're going to have a break because
Oh, we will. Banded back over to you.
We're having a break now, doing that.
We're going to bring the break forward because
Let's do
people
that.
we're ready for it, and
Let's have a stretch out.
we're now 12 minutes over break time. Kirsty. Thank you, Richard.
What you were saying?
it's on a mouse break, Jamie.
That was all over and done with quite quickly.
That one again?
The transition.
We're hearing all of my CVs.
So everything we
Read everything, but confusing. Ground level. So confusing.
There is a really helpful video from the King's.
Oh yeah. Governance overall in the ICB and its value added. Change it. So really, the proposal
was a really easy way, and I'm just wondering if you think King's Fund. So maybe put it on.
Are you?
We don't know what we don't know.
Exactly, yeah.
It's always like,
You know the primary care that you've been talking about today?
Again.
The care being talking about, the dentists, opticians and what have you.
Yeah.
Are they going to be commissioned at system level or play?
System. Yeah, the truth, you couldn't fragment it to any smaller age or anything.
The 1,000 contracts plus.
Well, it's in many ways, it's almost like a lift and shift, different shift again. And then therein lies isn't it about transformation opportunity?
I know, just without I'm asking because Health Watch is a consulting changes to that.
That's to my next forward.
The secretary consultant, usually we're Wednesday, change to any services. That's how it should be.
I didn't have a bit of mine. It stood out to me. It stood out to me in that meeting.
That's what I'm doing.
Everybody, I was sort of thinking.
Regulatory should be clear.
I was thinking, you know, and I never speaking to.
That's why I arranged it. With, you know, because we knew it was going.
Challenges, the assessments, I think.
When you did say yes, I think.
But actually. They do. But
That's
when you get support, when you do try and, you know, you've got a different role, and you get some of the support and things, so, yeah. Another one coming up soon with them.
I was thinking that.
We could with. The engagement people that, you know, the support the parent care and other engagement around how we can sort of reach out and try, because I think it'd be good to sort of somehow create that space for people to come together, and it don't need to be or any of the statutory organisations doing it, does it? It's just that, you know, create the space for people to start to come and then talk to each other. So, you know, actually, I've been here and it was really good because I was telling people, you know, some of the sort of challenges that I have, other people have, and they sort of work that through and add it to the support for this drive. For other people,
So the other question is just going around the room. Where's the disability voice? Who's representing the community?
From a organisation.
Well, listening to you saying.
Carly's usually.
I don't know the membership.
Yeah, Carly's usually.
Presumably you're not more.
It's the eternal question. You don't have. We have it. You have it. Really, it's co-production. So what is this?
It's where, because you know, like.
Yeah.
Making decisions when you talk.
You don't have to. The D line. That's it, the D line. Yeah, yeah.
Nick's always, can we just cut to your jet?
We always.
I don't mind that.
We're on the same page.
Okay. So I just wanted to talk.
I feel Barnsley guilty that I'm not doing it myself.
To Peter about it last night and he said, you can't wear your wet, so that's not. That's
If it was him, he'd absolutely with his willies on. Come on.
Then we went in to see it.
Roadshow.
When he said that, Jack reminded him that.
Air temperature. Like,
Well, I heard. driving on the Amy break.
So
People here. Says we're not doing any outdoor swimming yet. Since
we haven't got lessons today. Do you know when she came?
Yeah.
There is it. Oh, what are you doing? Your trip to Australia?
A bit less than what we used to.
Maybe, years ago. Walkers, but we'll go off.
So we haven't got the fashion.
I was working at Chester. We just went to Snowden and we only there's a lake at the bottom.
Unless you just want to drop me an email. Did you ring Jenny Clark?
Cheers, very nice.
Right, so Carly and I obviously no, it's on the list of things we need to do.
So I give it 2 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah, so we swimming.
Yeah, Andrew, check her. Just
Oldest inland open water.
Hi. Thanks for coming.
He's been having heart attacks. I think I was like, I was really cold.
Even Radford told me and he goes, are you sure?
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Item 16.
I don't think that's what I was doing today. I thought.
Sure,
It's the next thing that, yeah.
Just thinking,
I don't know how this is going to go right in this one.
practice when you're holiday.
Sometimes I'm taking notes. Yeah, I've got this. Other times I think. I know it's saying. It's still pushing my head. By the time I'm moving to Monday. I start this afternoon.
I feel like
Right, we all back. Adrian.
To another practice. It's got to be a wind up. About what creature in the dirt.
somebody said
Rare.
in the
It's a jet noise here. Just want to move the car. We need to wait then, don't we? For a little while. For this next time.
things don't add that into the mix.
Bad was doing it. There's not the giggles there, Bob. What's going on?
There's April 1st,
I don't know where this year's gone. But it's absolutely
it's incredible.
It's, I can't believe it.
Where the years gone.
Where the years
Oh, yeah.
20.
Son's 21 in 2 weeks. I don't know where my life's gone. Yeah.
You don't get it back again.
So when you've been telling me you're only 37, that's clearly not true, is it, Bob?
No. Guilty.
Oh, goodness me. Still way away. How much more?
6 years on Saturday.
What's that?
Well, 3 is like disappeared, hasn't it?
6 years since I was a
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It feels like a year since we did the engagement.
So, colleagues that are online, we aren't just sort of forgetting that we're in a partnership meeting. We have remembered this, but just by magic, Piers Madway has come back from moving a car. So here we go. We couldn't do the next bit without you, Madway. So I think. All right, let's get back onto business. So, yeah, are we all right down the end of the table? I'm in the world to rights there. I can see as ever. All right. I feel like. Do you remember that? I'm showing my age. Do you remember the wheel tappers and shunters?
Yes.
I felt like I was doing that then. Anyway, so let's move on. So item 16, the PDA agreement. Madway, I think you're doing this, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Thank you, Wendy. So this is about the Barnsley Primary Care Practice Delivery Agreement. So just to give a bit of a background, this has been in existence since 2014-15, and it's an agreement made with 31 practices in Barnsley. And the aims of PDA is to invest in capacity needed to deliver consistently high standard general practice across Barnsley. The main focus of PDA has always been to invest in the infrastructure to deliver and enhance the quality of the care, which reduces health inequalities of patients living in Barnsley. So the objectives of 2023-24 PDA is to maintain and develop the core services with a focus on NHS priorities and South Yorkshire ICB primary care strategy. So these schemes have been developed ensuring there is no duplication with other contractual requirements such as Quality Outcomes Framework, IAF, which is Investment and Impact Fund, PCN Network, DESIS, etc. So these meetings are well attended with well representation from SYICB Barnsley Place, the local IT services, local medical committee, and practice managers. Since the advent of PDA from 2014-15, practices have worked and delivered on 44 clinical schemes and 49 non-clinical schemes. So moving forward for the year coming, the schemes that have been identified will be focusing on various elements. I think I'll take it that the papers have been read, but I'm going to sort of concentrate on one or two elements which are new for this area, for this year, and the importance of it, obviously. So the scheme one is about long-term conditions. So there's a little bit about spirometry training, retaining the skill set that's already there within Barnsley. We do know there's long waiting times for spirometry now. So looking at how we can reduce those waiting times and get the procedure done for the patients. Increasing referrals for patients and get them to engage with low-calorie diet for diabetic patients. Where there's lack of engagement, we're trying to set up a process where we're hoping to get in-house training with the help of health and wellbeing coaches. Full implementation of See the Signs, which we know is an IT tool which aids in early cancer diagnosis, appropriate 2-week wait referrals, and adequate safety netting for the patients who've been referred, and the follow-up cancer care reviews within the community. Cardiovascular disease, these elements have already been in existence. So this is a little bit of an extension of what's already been done. So there is support with sort of diagnosis and management of atrial fibrillation, where the patients, where it is appropriate, they're not particularly symptomatic, doesn't need hospital admission. They can be managed within primary care. Diagnosis management and ongoing reviews with regards up titration of medications with for patients presenting with heart failure. Lipid optimization, we all know newer drugs are coming, so it's sort of training our primary care team in sort of using these newer drugs, and how do we improve lipid optimization in the community, because there is a push. This is actually aligned to the SYICB primary care strategy for the year. Dementia and carers, so identifying dementia champions within practices, training for the champions, aiming towards improving the care provided for the patients. Increased support in primary care for carers. Population health management, this is a new component, and the whole idea of this scheme is to improve the population health, aiming to reduce health inequalities. So the scheme supports a proactive approach in general practice by using population health data and intelligence, and it is split into various areas, which is early years, early diagnosis and treatment of chronic disease, living well, aging well, etc. Then the scheme 5 is IT, digital and data quality, which is the ask of the practices is to engage in local, regional and national projects to enable successful implementation of various digital and IT projects. Scheme 6 is medicines optimization in primary care, which includes a number of other areas. So I think the paper is here. Like I say, it's quite a lengthy paper. I tried to get a snapshot of what it is and what the schemes are for the year coming. And I think it is for approval, isn't it, Jamie? I'll pause there and take any questions.
By the place committee of the ICB.
By the place committee of the ICB, yes. So, well, thank you, Madeleine, for that summary. And is there any questions at all with regards to this? It is a large investment, and in the context of the financial challenges that we shared earlier on, the PDA and the delivery of the PDA is not excluded from any of that. We have to continue to understand the return on investment in this space, as with everything else. And I think that's just a point of principle, which I know we all recognise. Equally, really understanding the impact and the outcomes that this investment is returning for us, and its interface with other services. So, for example, your teams, your area, Jill, in terms of community health and others. So my sort of like general principle and reflection about this investment. Richard, did you want to come in? And then I think Julie wants to come in as well.
Yeah, so my question is a bit about that. So what's the consequence of this? So what are the, this all seems very sensible, but you do this, what are the health outcomes? What will be the difference in referrals to hospital, activity, all that sort of stuff? Have we quantified all of that? I apologize, I haven't read all the paper in detail, so if it's in there, I've missed it. But yeah, so you know, what's the public health benefit of it? Also, I'm just thinking, there's nothing on mental health in here. I don't think.
There is, I think, because there are elements within IIF and yeah, in investment and impact fund, because there's learning disabilities, SMIs for mental health checks. That's all included in IIF. So these schemes have been sort of thought through, making sure that they don't duplicate what we are doing in other schemes. So that's where the mental health system is within IIF.
So we'll be expecting, I don't know, so for example, more referrals with atrial fibrillation to the cardiology clinic.
So we'll be you should be expecting to see less, obviously, because these are patients which can be managed within primary care. The whole idea is pick them up, you make the diagnosis and treat them within primary care.
So we won't be doing echoes or anything like that.
So we obviously will be doing open access echo, open access 24
There will be an effect. There will be an effect on those. That's what I'm trying to get at. So, so you do all this, and there'll be consequences, good consequences, but then you're measuring.
Yeah,
and you know, will we then struggle to do our echo waiting times? That's the sort of thing.
Impact, yeah. But I suppose these could be the patients who will end up going to see a cardiologist, so it should prevent a cardiology referral as well. You know, because we have open access echo, open access 24-hour ECG, so they do go get the diagnosis, but then it should stop a cardiology referral because they are effectively being managed within the community. I think it would have been helpful if Sarah was here, because she could have given a snapshot of how many have been diagnosed and managed within primary care last year. I can give sort of numbers for my own practice. So for example, there were 42 patients who were new onset AF, which were managed within my practice, about 10,000 patient population last year. But that's one. But then I think one of the other things which is important in amongst all this is how many points are being allocated to each scheme. I think if you actually look at it, it's not finalized yet, but a big focus has been on population health management. I think just to give a snapshot of what population health management is all about, is working on the data which will be provided by Joe Minton, I think, where we will be looking at sort of getting engagement of people, sort of focusing on health inequalities to actually improve the health of these patients. And there is a big focus on that. So I think the points for AF, heart failure, we're talking about 5 points each, something like that. So the big focus is on population health management. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah.
There was a spreadsheet, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's how we'd be doing it.
I'll take all the questions and then come back at the end. Julia, did you want to?
Yeah, so I mean, probably I was going to ask a bit about what Richard asked, but actually, I mean, thanks for the overview. I mean, I think they're pretty much the right areas and absolutely support them. I guess my question is how are you going to deal with evaluating what happens? So if there's variation, so some practices might be doing really, really well and other practices may not be doing quite so well. How's that oversight done, and what do we do about it? I suppose it's a quality question, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's in the same. I think it's in the same vein. I think what we've got in the pack is the nature of the investment as it's deployed against a set of schemes. What we don't see in the pack is that how do we intend to quantify both in terms of quality and impact, really, both on partners, on the public. It's that sort of dynamic, I think, that's probably missing, that we know we need to do some more work on. James, did you want to come in at all? And then I'll pass back to Jane and Madeline.
Yeah, again, I suppose as an observation, I was working at the CCG when this was set up in 14, 15, and it was designed to provide some really sort of targeted preventative approach to some of the areas that might otherwise be missed, and it was sort of based on a sort of QOF type approach, but just allowed us to really focus in on the bits that matter in Barnsley. So when you're talking about the wider impact of the priorities stuff we were discussing yesterday, it then allows those to be cascaded through practices in a really proactive and focused way, which otherwise might not be there. And again, in terms of the funding that's there, GP practices in Barnsley have historically been underfunded, and this is to correct some of that. And what this has done is allowed practice to increase clinical staff over the past number of years and retain those staff, again increasing access to primary care, which again should in turn have a direct impact on the hospital and other services. It's just some of that is difficult to quantify, and again, being preventative, it is in some areas again difficult to quantify in terms of this person then hasn't turned up somewhere else. But I know that there is a focus to try and cover off that as much as possible. But then the other bit I'd just say is the work that's been done to make sure it doesn't overlap with off investment fund and all those things is really difficult in terms of how things change, but it gives again a broad spectrum of work that primary care can do to contribute to the system objectives that we've got in place.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pages for this item, isn't there? There's a lot of papers. In the detail of the schemes, we did try and get everybody that were developing them to focus on having some real measurable indicators in there in terms of outcomes, so that we can track that and see that through. What we would have done previously in terms of measuring, so just answering Julia's question, is taking that into our primary care commissioning committee through the year. So we've not got a primary care commissioning committee anymore. So we have conversations around having a primary care development delivery group. We've got a primary care quality group already, where we take some of this information, look at the outputs through the year. And I think, Julia, you're right, in terms of variation, inevitably there will be some. One of the things I guess it's probably important to say, we'll get familiar with it, but the reason we brought together the PDA into one document that practices sign up to, because previously we had a number of different schemes, and perhaps some practices would pick and choose certain ones. So what's easy to deliver, what's not, what are we doing well on already, what are we not? And that led to some inequity. So this is encouraging everyone to sign up. And we've got opportunities through the BEST event, but also through the PCN to share some of that information with the clinical directors to then, look at how in neighbourhoods or even on that wider Barnsley footprint, we can support each other, share best practice, look to support. And it's not on PDA, but the example around the annual health checks for LD that were formed part of the PCN DES, practices that struggled in terms of resource or other things to be able to bring some of them forward, actually working together, been able to bring all practices up. Yes, not to where we would want, but they've all improved in terms of performance. So I think that's how we try to address that, Julia.
Okay, Jane.
I'd just like to ask, in terms of the work around dementia and especially dementia champions, how does that link into Dementia and Me? And sort of like then onto the third sector Dementia Alliance?
So I can probably answer that. I think through the primary and community alliance. Through the Primary and Community Alliance, there's definitely been connection with Emma White as part of one of the sorts of officers that supports Dementia and Me and Dementia Alliance, really about ensuring that there is absolute connectivity between the work of that alliance and the ambitions in here. So I just think it's probably picking that up again with Emma to make sure that we are as connected as we need to be through the alliance. So I think that's, James, something that a way that you could pick that up, and yourself actually, Jill, because you've been involved in those conversations too. Salma, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just quickly, really. I mean, I agree with Julia. Really helpful to hear what the priorities are, and they're absolutely the right ones. But I am struck by Richard's question. I think it is a helpful question. And I am sat here wondering how these connect back into the Community and Primary Care Alliance, because there's inevitably going to be a relationship there. So I think it would be helpful to get back what the work is on them, because it's not just primary care that'll do it. For example, the mental health and learning disabilities annual health check, significant progress. Proud that Barnsley is ahead of the pack across West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire, but that's been across the system. It's been system work that's supported and enabled that, and primary care obviously has been at the heart of that. But it'd be worth us starting to think about what the impact of that alliance working together, and to keep thinking whole system, I think, as we address some of these priorities, recognising that it might create challenges in different bits of the system, and really thinking about where that impact is going to be. And we'll only know that if we get the monitoring of the pathways and the baseline measures right before we set off. So I think the challenge is right from Richard, and I think there's a bit of work here to do to think about what's the relationship between these priorities and the alliance actually.
Agreed. So I think upon that basis,
Just one more point. So it's just
Jill, then did you want to have the last word, Madway? Come on, Jill.
It's similar to Richard's observation, really, and I suppose they're all really credible schemes. But I think it is thinking through and having further discussions with other providers as well around the impact where some of this may hit. And one of my biggest concerns, and Madway will know this, is around housebound patients and our lack of capacity to be able to support and deliver some of this on behalf of primary care. It is a real issue for us that we've struggled, post-COVID to get back on board with just the basic of long-term conditions reviews. So, it is a key factor for us when we're considering anything, I think. But I think it's worth thinking about where else it hits in terms of specialist nursing services in community as well, in terms of that increased referral rate potential, just to understand it so that we can prepare for it properly.
Okay. So I think for me, I do see this as a real opportunity moving forward. Obviously, this will be the last schemes in the CCG era because it was started half CCG and half ICB. But listening to some of the conversations we had all afternoon, there's so much about joined up working. So moving forward, we are doing, then get everybody down on, around the table and just look at the schemes individually and see how the impact is going to be and how we can actually align and bring everybody together to form the schemes moving forward for the following years.
Okay, so in terms of decisions, I believe this is a decision I can take under the delegation, under sort of my delegation. However, nevertheless, we will share the report. Note that there are people that aren't present here, so we'll share the report again to individuals. And there are some actions there. I think we know that there is a really helpful challenge, I guess, really about impact. Unintended consequences sometimes that you can find with these things, and that we need to socialise that, and the best place to do that is with the Primary and Community Alliance. I am conscious that the hospital isn't represented in there, so we need to make sure it's an inclusive conversation for this particular part of the conversation, so we need to do that. And I just want to stick with the principle, as we all know, that the financial position is challenged and that this isn't outside of the scope of that, and that we need to continue to make the Barnsley pound work really hard for us all. And I think that's it, unless Richard's going to tell me otherwise that I've made the wrong decision and it's right. But I think that's, and my understanding, this is a decision I can take under my scheme.
Yeah,
reservation. So okay, is that all right? Okay, have you got that recorded?
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're now back down to quality and safety report. Madway, are you doing this?
I'm doing this on behalf of Jane. So I think we've got a couple of areas to escalate within this report. The first one being lack of specialist local support for patients with complex nutritional failure, including those with eating disorders, such as restrictive intake or food avoidance. So Barnsley Hospital NHS Foundation Trust have noted an increase in the number of inpatients that would require increased support from the medical and mental health teams. And there's a lack of specialist support for those individuals with complex ED requirements, often resulting in patients being treated, and beds are scarce and difficult to find. So this has been discussed in length in the quality and the safety group. And I think Barnsley Hospital are drafting a paper to request funding for a specialist matron who would support the ward and be the link in the community and get the input from the specialist eating disorder unit.
Yeah. Do you want to just stop there very quickly on that? I mean, the other mitigations is clearly that the South Yorkshire MHLDA provider collaborative has the consideration about how it establishes an all-age eating disorder pathway. Fundamentally, that it knows it needs to work on because there are pressures and challenges in many different places. So it's probably worth noting that on any future reports too. So keep going then, Madhway.
Yeah. And the second area for escalation is there's ongoing discussions about the provision of breast non-surgical oncology due to increased demand and staff vacancies, which is a national issue. So Sheffield Teaching Hospital, which are the main provider, working with NHS England, NHS South Yorkshire and other regional providers on potential mitigating actions for this. So the risk to the Barnsley Hospital, the trust instead and lack of specialist consultant input into treatment decision-making process. So this is at a time when Barnsley Hospital has also reduced staff capacity in breast tumor pathway and identified an additional clinical nurse specialist to manage patients with metastatic breast cancer. So I think the SY Hospital's chief exec and exec ICB members are to identify a solution for this problem, really.
Yes. I mean, very specifically, I mean,
this is on the risk register as well.
Yes, colleagues, Richard, do you want to add in terms of oncology services? I'm no further informed than I was earlier on the week, but I do understand that a number of meetings have been taking place.
Yeah, we're not around the table in those meetings. Had an update from this STH chief executive about a week ago, saying that they are not ceasing the service at any particular date. Looks like the service will continue, but they've sort of warned that waiting times will be longer. I guess will be a massive worry for women with breast cancer because time is a critical part of what everyone worries about. But that's all we've got. I don't think Sheffield have found support's been forthcoming from other oncology providers. We also understand that urology is also at risk, although had nothing formal there on that one. So I guess it does raise the issue about how we as a place understand the risks from our tertiary providers of services. And Barnsley is an interesting place because, of course, we could refer north if the referral pathway south wasn't working. We've been sort of over the years steered away from doing that because of the need for Sheffield to maintain a catchment population that supports tertiary services. Of course, intrinsic to that is the fact that they can provide those services for us. So again, we've been talking to our teams about doing some of the groundwork to think about what would it take if we had to refer somewhere else. What would we have to do at our end to get our bit of the pathway right? Just so if we do get that instruction that we're going presumably north, then we're not starting from scratch in terms of our thinking. But it's all somewhat unsatisfactory, and I think Bina and I are both worried about some of the what's been said in public or not about this as well.
Yes, so we were asked as place directors to brief our MPs where we could, and I'm well aware that Gavin and Piers have been also briefing, very particularly the Sheffield MPs, I think, as well, but also awaiting an update really in terms of where they've got to in terms of exploring mitigations and what's the best option in terms of tackling this particular risk. What we're particularly interested, I think, as place, as was relayed by the MPs, understandably, was understanding risk as it appertains to Barnsley people, and what does that really mean? So I think that's what we need to try and understand. I think in a richer way in due course. I don't know which order it was, but Julia and then Salma.
I think mine were more general observations, which is about the quality report. I mean, first of all, apologies if I'm missing anything. I couldn't open the embedded document, so I don't know if that's something that could be sent separately in future. But I just think about this quality report as a journey, because I think on our first meeting, we had a slightly strange one, which we talked about because it was kind of flagging areas that didn't seem a massive kind of concern right across the system. And so I just felt it might be worth doing a bit of a sense check. So for everyone sitting on the board, you'll all be having kind of quality meetings within your own organisations, whether these feel the right ones. I mean, to me, they certainly do. They're kind of big concerns, aren't they? Just on the eating disorders one, yeah, massive concern that I'm aware of. I just have to raise a specific point about the all age meeting, which despite it being a big concern, I am worried that it's been cancelled at short notice, and we're not getting some of the progress that we need to see. Which is specific comment. But my bigger thing is about, are we getting to the right place where we're really looking at the right things in terms of our quality oversight as a whole system? And for me, it feels like we are, but I'm not on all those boards, so I don't know whether any of you are sitting there thinking, God, they haven't raised that one, and I'm really worried about it.
I think it'd be fair to say we're growing into this world in terms of quality, and whether or not we're having the right conversations in the right space, both at the ICB level and at place, and then of course in organisations. So that whole rhythm of quality assurance, I think we have to keep alive to, in terms of the, are we adding value fundamentally, and are we focusing on the right things? Salma, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it really is around the eating disorder pathway again, and I'm with you all in terms of we learn as we go on some of this stuff, and it'll bed in, and we'll be focusing on the right things eventually. But you see, I'm wondering how this fits into the local conversation around. I know the community transformation's focused on the community bits of the pathway, but I've been very clear that any community transformation in any of our places, we should be thinking whole system, because there's absolutely a relationship to local inpatient capacity, capability, and what the new pathway might look like actually. So I'm wondering how much we've progressed that locally, and it's my naivety, perhaps we have. And the second bit I'm wondering is there then a role for a system-wide quality board to invite, a group of people in to have a conversation about what's happening across the system, what the development opportunities are, and to perhaps help them connect in the right way if that's not what's happening. So I think there is stuff that we can do locally, as well as I take your point, Wendy, that there is the system-wide mental health LDA priority around eating disorders right across the region that we can tap into and keep influencing and shaping. But I think there's something about what can we do in place around this. And do correct me if the conversation's happening, Dave might know better, but it's definitely one that I'll take back into our organisation, say that we should be connecting into this.
Thanks, Salma. Gina?
Yeah, it's just in the actual kind of risk and mitigation around the non-surgical oncology, does say that the chief execs across South Yorkshire and the hospitals are identifying a solution, and I'm not sure that's actually the case. I think it's solely in the hands of NHSE and Sheffield, and we're waiting to see what the outcome of that is. So I think that probably needs amending, because this is in the public domain, isn't it?
Thanks, Shane. I think that's right, actually. I think the conversation has very much been about the ICB facilitating a conversation between the provider, NHSE, other specialist centres, to see whether or not mutual aid is an option. Clearly there's fragilities and other oncology specialist services, etc. And then to present back almost really the outputs from that in terms of then a further consideration. I haven't as yet seen any of the outputs from that so far. So can we just take an action to amend that mitigation to be clear that that is an ICB NHSE facilitated conversation?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's two bits just for me. One is, how do we deal with the threat to breast cancer services for women in Barnsley and South Yorkshire? But also a little bit about how do we get here? Because we're all dependent on, there's a monopoly service from our tertiary providers largely, isn't there? So how do we get here? What other risks are there? And, are there any lessons here for how we as a system react earlier to stop us getting to this crisis situation? It's easy to be wise after the event, but I think when something goes wrong, it is worth having a proper look at that. That does feel like that's all of our business, not just Sheffield's business.
That's right. That's right. We must take. I mean, obviously, we're trying to garner a solution, aren't we? Fundamentally, and understand how that plays itself out because the system had been in place. But nevertheless, you know, it felt quite late in the day when this was coming onto our tables, really, and we wouldn't have wished that to be the case. So there has to be some lessons there. Bob.
Yeah, it's an overall observation, and certainly thanks for doing the report today. And I'm certainly happy to pick up with Jane directly. It's improving, and I think that's an accurate reflection of what I was discussed and all the rest of it. So that's really good. I think part of the development is quite challenging. So we're quite lucky, say, in terms of we're working together quite a lot as partners. So you're learning a lot more about what's going on, what the risks and pressures are, what the politics all as well. I think with these, as the committees develop, some people are probably still in quite a transactional space, but saying, this is my issue, I'm coming, I want to, I think Dr. Sunday came and saw this morning actually, she said it's great to get the opportunity to kind of get across stuff and all the rest of it. So she felt it was a supportive process actually. But whether some of us support in advance of meetings, I mean, it's this risk and this quality and the different things, but there are interlinks of just saying, look, let's just have a bit of an open conversation about what's worrying everybody. Where does that sit? Is it a quality risk? Is it financial risk? Is it an operational risk? And just kind of support with it as well. Because I think it's clearly moving on as a report, but I think if you actually said, well, what's worrying you? And have that open discussion. Because to a certain extent, you just want to transact the meeting, don't you? You want to get the meeting done, it's a committee, get through it and survive and all the rest of it. It's probably it's probably something we need to bring into an open conversation about risk, really, don't we? Because if someone was coming in from the outside and saying, is this everything you're worried about? We'd all be like, we'd break rank and go, no, there's like, what's happening here, what's happening there, and all the rest of it. And I think it's just, it might help accelerate the development process a little bit, I'm thinking, just to support, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's helpful, really. All the suggestions are really, really helpful in terms of maybe that's something we can reflect on in PPDG together.
Yeah, I think so.
Really, we know we need to reshape the governance and we're going to take stock of the governance. We know I've said earlier on, we've got pod coming down the train, so all the pharmacy, optometry, dentistry coming down the train. So we do need to take stock.
Feature on here.
Well, exactly. We've got to be live, I think, and being agile, I think, to adapting and moving. So I keep saying value add and make sure that we're having, it's a lot of time, a lot of energy goes into this.
You can tell. Yeah.
So it really does need to, and people are owning it and people are taking it, and that's really important. So we need to continue on with that adventure. But let's pick it up, Bob, shall we, in PPDG? Okay, all right then. If there's no further questions, I think we're then on to the performance dashboard. Amy?
Yeah, that's fine. So this is with me, and I know this is still for us as a place committee work in progress, and we've been having a conversation internally this morning around how we sort of improve and really focusing on, like we've just said, for quality, some of the key areas from a performance perspective for Barnsley. But I did want to share just a couple of things with you, and again, it's my second apology for lots of pages. But I've shared, as well as our local information, I have shared with partnership members the report that went to the ICB in March. So the ICB performance report, which is quite a long document, covers an whole range of areas from primary care, 111 in ambulance, urgent care, elective diagnostic, cancer, and then through to quality, people, finance, and there's a summary, long one, but a summary, and then some more detailed scorecards. And I think as we look at through the finance, performance and efficiency group, which we've got all of our partners as part of, we'll look at the detail of that information and make sure we're bringing out the local priorities, linking it back to our Barnsley Place plan, so that when we're coming to this group as a committee, we've got a clear dashboard that does one, constitution, which I'll come on to in a second, of the measures there, the objectives that we've discussed earlier as part of the operational planning, expectations and how we're doing against those, and then any of the measures that we've set out against the priorities that are included in the Barnsley plan, because I don't think that's there as it currently stands. So that second part is more for information. So more of the sort of traditional NHS performance report, which is included as the sort of dashboard that's got the reds and greens. Just a quick overview around that. So from an urgent care perspective, I think we've set out a plan for next year to get to where we need to. Still experiencing some real challenges in terms of waiting times in A&E. I think the performance last 2 weeks, although up and down, has probably improved a bit from this position. From this is January, so it is improving overall. We've still got a little bit of a way to go. I think the other bit I'd pick out from there, and it was just the fact that there were a green on the dashboard. It's the first time I've seen it for a while because of COVID, but ambulance. So category 1 response times. It's the first time since May 22 that Yorkshire Ambulance Service have received within 15 minutes. So I think that's quite important. So that's urgent care. In terms of the sort of elective care and expectations around waits. So February, we've still got, from a Barnsley perspective, a number of patients. There were 5 at that point, waiting 104 weeks, so I've been waiting 2 years, and they're not at Barnsley Hospital. They're waiting at Sheffield Teaching.
You had a heart attack then for a second.
And apologies because I
don't want that happening.
The word is not clear because it then goes on to say the trust house executive oversight. So what that should be is so the first number, the 5, is Barnsley patients. The Barnsley Hospital's got a really robust process in terms of the executive oversight and seeing things through. So we've not got any patients at Barnsley Hospital at 104 weeks, and I think 78 weeks either. Because when we got this data in February, I think we've got 1. But I think that's now gone. So there are still a number of patients in the 65.
There's one this morning. Couldn't be by tonight.
Yeah, so people who could trip over if they're not treated in time, but the performance good there. And I think the other area is probably worth us flagging, linked to elective, but is around diagnostics. So again, this is one where pre-pandemic, really good performance against the sort of six week target. So you can look at it either way. So either 1% or less of people should wait more than 6 weeks, or 99% should be seen within 6 weeks. I think I've said this before, but it went where probably only about half of people were being seen in 6 weeks during the sort of height of the pandemic. That's improving month on month that we're seeing the reporting, and now is up towards that sort of 90-odd%. And Barnsley Hospital again, higher performance than the overall for Barnsley patients, recognising that we've got some waiting for diagnostics in other providers. Still some real challenges around cancer. And we've just talked about oncology, but actually across the whole pathway, where whether that be 2 week wait, which goes up and down. There's quite a bit around when appointments are offered and patient choice that impacts on this one, or might be patient lack of choice, but that's how it's recorded. But I think one of the key ones, and the one in the planning guidance for next year, is around faster diagnosis standard, and we've achieved that again. So I think last month we reported we achieved and achieved that again. So that's a real positive. There are some challenges in that whole 62 days. So from diagnosis to then treatment, that often involves treatment across a number of providers, particularly where there are complex pathways, and that does tend to be where we see more of the breaches. So that's where we are in terms of cancer. And then from a mental health and learning disability perspective, I think we've probably touched on some of these earlier, but good performance in terms of early intervention in psychosis, delivering well above the target there, which is one of the constitution expectations. IAPT, moving to recovery, good, but as I flagged, still seeing a challenge in terms of the numbers accessing, and Swift are doing some work around how we, I touched on this earlier, but how we reach out, different models of access, looking at digital type solutions that can support people to come in as well. So I think they're the headlines in terms of constitution and the things that we're able to account to. What sits just behind in that first document there is linked to what has been our place plan. So there are a number of measures. I don't propose going through all of these, but under the boards that have been taking work forward. So there's a couple of pages around some of the indicators linked to care closer to home. That includes GP appointments, how long people are staying in hospital, so the long length of stay over 21 days and need to get out. It's got stuff around the neighbourhood teams in there, so that's there for people to have sight of and see. And then it also goes through the others. So we've got urgent care in there, planned care, mental health partnership, best start and better lives, which brings in some of the social care information, because I think we talked before around it being very much health focused, and it still is, but there are aspects of that. So that's there. People can see it, and I'll stop. Make any questions. It always feels a strange when we're delivering a performance report when you're not directly responsible for a lot of the performance, say, but you ask for questions, and it'll be why you're not doing that.
Oh dear, thanks, Jamie. Do you want to mention about the development of the out of hospital?
Oh yeah, you're right.
Let's comment on this before we move off it.
Yeah.
It's a minor presentation point on the front sheet of that one there.
Yeah.
It lists providers, Barnsley Hospital and Yorkshire Ambulance Service as our providers, and puts all the mental health things under Barnsley Hospital.
Oh. I'll get that changed.
We could have an issue with.
Depends if it's
Don't mind.
Yeah,
they're green, leave them. Green.
Okay, let's talk about the out of hospital dashboard as well.
We've got a list. We'll get back to it.
No, that's fine. So yeah, I mean you've seen it, Richard, haven't you? You picked up and
It was shared with me from another place.
Yeah, that's right. So NHS England have started to pull together, ask lots of questions around community type services, as we do the board assurance framework type stuff for urgent care. They started asking, Amanda, haven't they, for aspects around community services as well, in terms of how we're progressing. They've then started to obviously pull a lot of information together, and I think it's probably because at a regional level they brought together the sort of portfolio of the director of primary care to be primary and community. So they're trying to sort of play that back. They've grabbed an whole load of data with not a lot of context, rated places and organisations, and presented it back. So it's created a league table that nobody really sort of knew about, and I think is not set within context. There's no rationale around some of it. I think it was probably shared from another place on the basis that they've got some really good rankings in that league table. Without naming who it is. But there are some reasons behind, and I spoke to you, Bob, about it, didn't I, the other day, just around you sort of get into, when you know some of it's not quite accurate, you can get into a defensive mode. So, and I'll just use an explanation. One of the things that's in there is around GP appointments, the number of GP appointments, and Rotherham are way out in front in terms of growth from 2019. And I thought, is that because they got really low numbers in 2019? But in terms of overall appointments as a place of a comparative size, it's higher. So they're higher. So that you would seem is the fact. But the way that Rotherham are set up as a PCN, the way they deliver their extended access services, means that a lot of those appointments are recorded in individual GP practice systems and therefore come through in the data. Ours are delivered through IART, and up until now, that's not been possible to include that in the GP appointment data that gets published by NHS England. So So you get into that sort of conversation, but I think you can always get into challenging the data. And I think once Anthony's wanting to look at it, he's got responsibility for primary and community services in the ICB. Go back and ask some questions of NHS England. You know, if this is going to be something that is there, then we should dig a bit underneath it. The areas where it is flagging things, because even if it is about the data and other things, what do we do then to make sure that we are getting things counted, reported? And I know the extended access will go live relatively soon, but other things that we're doing where we know that there are contact, where we've got practices that maybe are not, we do more. And it's the same for other aspects, because it's not I've just picked primary care, but it covers primary, community, some aspects of community mental health. So
and there are no social care metrics in there either. So I mean, I think it's about scope for me, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is about, if we're going to do this, what's the scope of it in all its glory, first of all? And I think that's the work that Anthony's going to try and take forward. So let's find the scope, hear about what's the job here, what to try and do, to what end. But it's good to see it emerging. I think that's a really positive thing. That it's an emergent piece of work. Sorry, Jay.
no, it's all right. I think so. We've seen it and are looking at it. How do we build in the right elements into here?
Yeah.
And then look at them areas that are coming forward. So we've got some work with. Because the other thing about building this report, I've always been conscious that we've got somebody within the ICB putting all of this data and doing things, the hospital related stuff. You take a lot of it to your board as well, don't you? So you're pulling it. It says exactly the same in terms of numbers, hopefully, because it's from the same. So how do we start to do some of this once? So where finance colleagues have been on the call today and are starting to look at the position together, we're looking at bringing people from our performance teams, BI teams together to do that as well, so that what we see in here is consistent and streamlined and similar to what you see in your boards for bringing together, obviously, all of the partnership elements to it.
Thanks, Jamie. Jill,
Can I just ask on the community data set, now is it carved up then, Jamie? Is it as swift as an organisation?
I'm really sorry. I'm really glad you said this, because I think one of the challenges that I sent back, one of the questions I sent back to Mel Howard was actually that some challenge around Swift's data and what we do around Swift's data. And I said, well, hang on, we can't just say that Swift are out of it, because and they are captured in West Yorkshire. We need to have the Barnsley slice or performance for Barnsley. So I know that might be complicated, but we do need to do it.
I suppose
Otherwise we won't get the total place, will we? But
I suppose it's understanding where they're extracting the data from.
Exactly.
Because obviously in terms of the CDS from a community data set, not everything's in there, is it? Because it depends what service you're delivering and how that's been commissioned.
Yeah.
And it's not the same across every community element of service, is it? There are new ones, aren't they, in terms of pathways and where they sit.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It's not an easy job, but it's all by its imagination. But it's the right job.
I haven't seen it.
The right job.
I'll share it with you, Jill, so you can.
It actually doesn't tell you which organisations have been told.
Yeah, it does say, the note from Mel Howard did say that the Swift data appears under the West Patch, and she wasn't sure if it could be separated to place. So, hence my response back. But Richard, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem with these things is they become factual, don't they? Because there's document out there, and we're ranked where we are. So, and of course, it's always tempting to say it's numbers, and I agree there's a plausible reason why it's numbers, but we also know from the patient survey that South Yorkshire has lower patient satisfaction with GP access than England, and within South Yorkshire, Barnsley has the lowest patient satisfaction. So I wouldn't want us to dismiss this out of hand. I think we want to do something about that. It's the anecdote, isn't it, that people say. And whether it's true or not, it's the perception, so it becomes truth, and that's what drives people's behaviours to come to A&E, for example. The other one in here, where we're in the bottom 5, is mental health urgent emergency care as well, and that's saying that we have, I think the implication of that is we have higher mental health attendances at A&E than we should do, or than other places do, which I guess may triangulate with the lower IAPT usage and higher crisis usage. So we're not recognising, I'm putting it together, so hypothesis is we're not recognising mental health issues at a stage when they are less severe, and then people end up in crisis and come into A&E. That may not be the correct explanation, but it's one possible interpretation, isn't it? So again, I'd be reluctant for us just to dismiss this and say, well,
Yeah.
it's like, there's a value we can take from it.
Agree. We need to work with it.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're all going to try and do. Adrian, did you?
Yeah, I think the mental health hub that's been set up in town will actually affect the number of patients attending
Yeah, it
O&E,
is.
and certainly the graphs seem to show that.
Yeah.
And now, of course, it's significant effect, positive effect, rather than, you know, an economic.
We did say earlier on, didn't we? It's about the development of our approach around performance, really. You know, how do you connect quantitative qualitative data alongside resources, people and money? How do you get to a point where you get a really rich understanding of that for ourselves at place? And that how does that then connect to our improvement imperative? So I think it's just that whole journey I think we need to go on over the coming months to continue to evolve our work in this space. So is there any further questions you've got on this item? Nope. Okay. So we've got a set of items there, we're well behind. So we've got a set of items from 21, which are the committee meetings and assurance reports. And let me get back to my agenda, which is probably quite helpful. Bear with me, got a few screens open. So you've got the report that's here for information around the senior management team decisions. It's there in your pack to note for information. So we have transparency of the decisions that we take within our health and care SMT. Anybody got any questions at all around there? Is there a table for information? Let's take any questions. Trying to catch up a little bit of time. We've got a set of minutes there from the quality and patient safety group, the finance performance and efficiency group, which we've obviously talked about today, and the involvement in the quality group. Any questions at all from those? Okay. We've also got the unadopted minutes there of the 2nd February 2023. And the minutes from the Place Partnership Delivery Group as well. Are there any questions at all from those? Which takes us, I've caught up a bit of time there, which takes us then into item 22 on the agenda, updates and escalations from partners. It's just any general updates that people want to share. Adrian.
I think that the thing that acknowledges the work that went off overview and scrutiny regarding adult mental health. There was a good turnout of elected members, so that worked, Wendy. And it was very positive, I have to say, and the chair was extremely complimentary about the work that had been done. I won't say what happened in the second part of the meeting because I wasn't there, but I'm sure the chair.
Oh, positive as well. Julia's got her hand up. I think both items were relatively positive, some good challenge and some good questions.
Yeah, I wish they'd read the papers before though, because it was a dull mental health, and it turned out to be half the questions were about children and young people.
Yeah.
The nature of scrutiny sessions at times, isn't it? Julia, did you want to come in?
I wasn't going to add on anything on that because I was actually on leave, so I wasn't there. But I just had a couple of updates from the council. Generally positive. So we've not once but twice have we been shortlisted for the Council of the Year. Which is excellent. Just for those of you who've worked with some of our long-standing cabinet members, and particularly Councillor Jenny Platts and Councillor Chris Lamb, they're both standing down in May, so they will be retiring. I wanted to let you know that. And some good news about Jim Andrews, obviously, who died, which is really tragic, but he has been accepted as an honorary member of the Faculty of Public Health, which is the first ever posthumous membership they've given, which is absolutely excellent and reflects the huge support he gave to us as a public health team. So that was something really positive at council this morning.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Julia. Anybody got any other items to share at all? Or indeed?
So just in terms of
thinking about, I mean, we've talked about virtual ward earlier, but just one of the positives from that is not only that we're ahead of the pack, certainly in South Yorkshire and in some respects the rest of the country, but actually it's the very positive relationship building that's enabled us to have with the consultants in the hospital, working alongside our community matrons as the complex leads in community. And actually, I'm really hopeful that there is really more work to be done in that space, particularly around frailty and the proactive care element of that. And I think the team have, actually set up, delivered at pace, set against a backdrop of the challenges around workforce that we've all got. So I just wanted to just mention that. And also from a UCR, urgent community response perspective, in terms of physical health services, we're averaging 45 to 50 crisis calls that we're responding to within that 2-hour time frame. And again, that's really a really good progress that we've made. And we're doing that obviously alongside Jazz and other colleagues to enable us to deliver that in a positive way. But obviously that is really up there. And I think we've been challenged a couple of times on our figures. And I want to say they're not made up figures. Absolutely, they're not made up. And the team can actually say that they're not made up, and it is challenging. Again, we're not fully staffed yet, but when we are, hopefully we'll be able to keep them more, certainly from the YAS staff as well. And then just on one of the areas that we're really severely challenged on at the minute is district nursing, which is our biggest core workforce. And there are a number of reasons for that. We've got a very young female workforce in district nursing, as you probably know, so we've got lots of maternity leave. And the temptation is that we're at local 4 on a daily basis to secondary care out quite often in terms of ED. And the temptation is to deliver all the asks that local 4 brings us in terms of the action cards. And I just wanted it to be noted here really that I can't deliver all those action cards because it just would make the situation worse. So, when there's a bit of a plea going out across the system, we are doing our best, I suppose, really. We've got some particular hotspots in district nursing. And obviously they've worked consistently and constantly, like lots of areas have, throughout the whole of COVID. They've not been working from home. They've been out there in and amongst. And I think actually that is some of the issues that we're struggling with now, is that burnout, and actually people deciding that they want to reduce their hours. We have to resist saying no to that, because that means that we can retain somebody, but it becomes more difficult then to recruit back into some of those posts. So I just wanted that to be noted today, because I think it's our biggest workforce in community and they are really struggling. And they're still consistently delivering round about 650 visits to housebound patients on a daily basis, and running about between 8 and 12 clinics on a daily basis as well. So what that means is, from a patient safety perspective, there are some risks for us all in the system, because they maintain the level of visits that they are with less staff. And obviously it is something that we've discussed at the quality board as well, that, and it's certainly on our risk register. So I just wanted to share that today. So there are lots of positives going on, but actually there are some still really wicked issues that we're dealing with in community.